Chapter 73. Before Chiu Tong could speak, the sound of footsteps could be heard. The two of them looked up to see the one-armed old man walking into the hall. The one-armed old man walked up to them and bowed. The young miss nodded, and Chiu Tong quickly returned the greeting. The young miss asked, "Elder Yu, why are you so flustered?" "Boss," Yu said with a straight face. "Young Miss Lu Air, who is in charge of weeding in the herb field, asked for leave yesterday because his mother passed away. The herb field is short of manpower, and I told Chiu Tong this afternoon, but I saw a 10-year-old child standing in the yard just now." "Is he the helper that Chiu Tong found? Was there not even an adult standing over at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency? Isn't this just brushing me off?" Chiu Tong's face flushed red from the series of questions that were thrown at her. At this time, the young miss comforted Elder Yu. "Elder Yu, Chiu Tong has always been cautious. Why don't you sit down first and listen to her? If you're not satisfied, why don't we swap?" Elder Yu's expression softened as he apologized to Chiu Tong. "Chiu Tong, you know how impatient I am. Why don't you tell me first?" Chiu Tong also hurriedly said, "It's nothing, Elder Yu. The medicinal field is very important to begin with, and it was just a coincidence that I pulled Zhang Xiaohua over. I was just about to report this to the young miss. Why don't you listen before making a decision?" Elder Yu nodded and found a chair to sit down. Chiu Tong also poured some tea and placed it in front of Elder Yu. Then, Chiu Tong told the two of them everything that happened today. When they heard that Zhang Xiaohua helped Chiu Tong get back her purse, the two of them nodded and thought that she was a very good child. When they heard that Zhang Xiaohua lifted the 500 gene stone, the young miss was extremely moved. Elder Yu didn't quite believe it and asked, "Were you there? Did you see that stone weight was 500 gene?" Chiu Tong said, "I wasn't there when she lifted it. I was talking to third Uncle Chu. When I saw Zhang Xiaohua, he had already lifted it. I'm not sure if that stone weight was 500 gene, but I heard from the people around me that it shouldn't be wrong." Elder Yu shook his head and said, "It's just hearsay. That stone lock might not necessarily weigh 500 kilograms. 300 to 400 kilograms should be the limit." After all, Chiu Tong didn't have any experience in this area. She had only heard from the people in the escort agency that she didn't have any concept of weight. She could only agree and say, "That's possible. After all, I haven't personally seen the weight of the stone locks in the escort agency." Elder Yu smiled and said, "Chiu Tong, the weight isn't written on the stone lock. You won't know even if you look at it. Ha ha." Chiu Tong blushed and said angrily, "Elder Yu knows that Chiu Tong doesn't know martial arts, yet you still use this to make fun of me." Seeing that there was no barrier between the two, the young miss was very gratified and said, "Elder Yu, even if it's 300 to 400 kilograms, it's still extremely rare for a 10-year-old child. However, his age is just as third Uncle Chu said, extremely awkward. With such aptitude, if it was discovered a few years ago, he would have been accepted into the Misty School and would have been a great help to our sect. However, now that he's been accepted into our Huanxi manor, it's not good to let him continue to be buried. Elder Yu, I'll leave this child with you for now. Let him do some manual labor, and there's no need for him to help out in the medicinal fields. Once the Lotus Escort Agency has received confirmation that we can use him without worry, we'll let him work in the medicinal fields. If that's the case, you'll have to take good care of him in the future. Take a look at his martial arts talent, and if there's a possibility of nurturing him, give him all the help you can. I'd like to see if our Huanxi manor can produce a stone cow." When Elder Yu heard this, he saw that the young miss's arrangements were watertight and didn't say anything else. However, when he heard the last sentence, he immediately thought of the giant stone cow's figure compared to Zhang Xiaohua's small and tender body. He couldn't help but shake his head. Were they clearly not on the same level? Then, he bowed to the young miss and took his leave. Seeing that Elder Yu had left, Chiu Tong couldn't help but pat her forehead and say, "Young miss, I was thinking about how to arrange for Zhang Xiaohua and completely forgot about Elder Yu. It's all thanks to young miss speaking up for me. Otherwise, the Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't even be able to enter his eyes." That young miss smiled and poked Chiu Tong's forehead, saying, "You little girl, I've never seen you do anything good all year round. Why are you helping Zhang Xiaohua today? If it wasn't for his young age, I would have thought it was you." Xiao Tong immediately refused and said with a smile, "Young miss, look at what you're saying. I only thought of my younger brother when I saw Zhang Xiaohua and saw how pitiful Zhang Xiaohua's situation was. That's why I wanted to help him. Why are you thinking of other things? Moreover, I'm even younger than young miss. Young miss doesn't even have a place to settle down. So what am I thinking of?" Ha ha ha. Xiao Tong actually started to tease the young miss. It seemed that this young miss really didn't put on any airs and had a very good relationship with the servants. The young lady didn't argue and sighed. Looking at the dark sky outside the hall, she said, "That's right. Blood ties are always strong. Someone you don't know made you think of your younger brother, and thus you have the heart to help. It can be said that love the house, love the crow. Only, I don't know if my elder brother is progressing smoothly." Xiao Tong saw that the young miss was frowning and hurried forward to say, "Young miss, you don't have to worry. Chief O has achieved great success in his martial arts, and there are only a few people in the Jianghu who can hurt him. Moreover, this time we're not attacking any large faction, just a small Luo Shui gang. Our large Misty School has planned for a long time, and there's no reason we can't take them down. Moreover, our Misty School's strength has greatly improved, and we definitely won't give the Luo Shui gang any chance." This young miss was actually the Misty School's head O Peng's younger sister, O Yin. Although Xiao Tong's words weren't without reason, O Yin still sighed and said, "If you stand by the river, how can your shoes not get wet? In the Jianghu, a storm of blood is common, and it's hard to guarantee that one day you won't make a mistake. We see the Luo Shui gang as a fat piece of meat, but won't others see our Misty School as a fat piece of meat as well? I only hope that Buddha will protect my big brother and allow him to return safely." Xiao Tong also said seriously, "Not to mention that Chief O is kind-hearted and has boundless fortune. Just based on the young miss' benevolence in everything, you'll be able to ensure Chief's safety." Oyin smiled and said, "I know, little girl. Hurry up and make arrangements for your brother. If Elder Yu makes arrangements, won't he be wronged?" Xiao Tong said, "I won't go. Although I was the one who brought him in, he has to be like the others. Otherwise, Zhang Xiaohua will be lazy, and Elder Yu won't be able to manage him." Oyin said, "Xiao Tong, I've always said that you're smart. Why are you so muddle-headed now? Zhang Xiaohua is just a child who just came from the countryside. If he mingles with a group of young people, it's inevitable that he'll be bullied." Xiao Tong finally understood Oyan's meaning and said, "I understand. And I have to hurry up and take a look. Those people in the medicinal field aren't good people. I can't let this child be bullied." After saying that, she bid farewell to Oyin and turned to leave the hall. Suddenly, Oyin called out to her, "Xiao Tong, wait." Xiao Tong obeyed and returned, asking, "Young miss, is there anything else?" Oyin said, "You don't have to go either. Let Elder Yu make the arrangements." Xiao Tong didn't know whether to laugh or cry, saying, "My dear young miss, what do you mean by this? One moment you want me to go, and the next moment you don't want me to go?" Oyin smiled and said, "I'm not teasing you. I wanted you to go just now because I was afraid that the child would be wronged. I'm not letting you go now because I want the child to be wronged a little and see his mentality. He's a child after all. Being wronged a little is good for him to understand the ways of the world and grow up well. Zhang Xiaohua grew up in the countryside and doesn't know how to scheme against others. It's good to let him experience it. Isn't there a saying that when the heavens are about to bestow a great responsibility, they must first torment the heart?" Xiao Tong nodded thoughtfully. She was secretly happy for Zhang Xiaohua in her heart. The young miss must have meant that she wanted to nurture Zhang Xiaohua well. It was also an opportunity for Zhang Xiaohua. Thus, she gave up on the idea of going out and stayed to chat with Oyin. Zhang Xiaohua's heart couldn't help but be in a mess after Elder used harsh words. He didn't know whether to sit or stand. He was afraid that the hateful one-armed old man would come back and tell him that he should leave. Huanxi Manor didn't want someone like him. Then where should he go in this boundless night? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was worrying about his gains and losses, there were noises and footsteps outside the door. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly stood up and carefully looked at the small round door. Not long after, the light of a fire could be seen. A group of people holding torches or lanterns walked into the small courtyard. The person at the front was a young man who was as thin as a bamboo pole. He was in his early 20s and wore a green robe and a small hat. He held a lantern in his hand. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua standing under the shelf, he couldn't help but be stunned. He walked up and asked, "Who are you?" Before Zhang Xiaohua could reply, the group of people had already entered the courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua didn't count them, but there were about 10 people. Most of them were holding lanterns and wearing green robes and small hats. There were also some who held torches and were dressed in martial attire. Zhang Xiaohua noticed that the people dressed in martial attire didn't mingle with the people in green robes and small hats. They didn't even walk into the courtyard together. The people in green robes and small hats came in first, and the people in martial attire walked in last. Moreover, the people in martial attire were obviously burly and looked very powerful. The people in green robes and small hats were slightly more ordinary. Zhang Xiaohua knew that the young man in front of him was probably the leader of this group of people. Thus, he respectfully replied, "This one is called Zhang Xiaohua. I'm here to plant the medicinal herbs. However, there seems to be a problem. Just now, a one-armed old man went inside to look for someone." Zhang Xiaohua? "Ha, Xiaohua, this name is not bad." Hearing Zhang Xiaohua introduce himself, some of the people in green robes and small hats couldn't help but laugh. They all whispered, "Hearing this name, it's a girl's name. However, he looks ordinary. Now that the sky is dark, I wonder how his skin is? How can he be worthy of the name Xiaohua?" Chapter 74. When they said this, although they were whispering, their voices were actually quite loud. They didn't have any intention of avoiding Zhang Xiaohua. Someone even said, "Who said that only girls can use this name? My aunt's second sister has a puppy called Xiaohua. All right, my uncle's second aunt's granddaughter also has a kitten called Xiaohua." After saying that, it made the people in green clothes and hats laugh. The people in black clothes looked at them and didn't say anything. They also didn't laugh. There was only ridicule on their faces, but it wasn't clear whether it was directed at Zhang Xiaohua or the people in green clothes and hats. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, her face couldn't help but heat up. She was very embarrassed. She had used this name for more than 10 years, so why hadn't she heard so much talk about it? When she was at home, there were many boy children who played with her, but she had never heard them laugh at her. Now that she had just left home, even her name was problematic. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know if she should blame her mother for giving her the wrong name, or if she should blame this group of people in green clothes and hats for being experienced and knowledgeable. Hearing everyone's laughter, the thin leader seemed to feel that something was wrong. He turned around and scolded, "How can you be so unruly? How can you bully a newcomer like this? Quickly go back to your room." Those people curled their lips, and with a face full of ridicule, they relaxed and returned to their rooms. It was as if meeting Zhang Xiaohua had lifted their tiredness. When the people in black clothes saw that they had all left, the simple middle-aged man walked over and patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. He didn't say anything, just smiled, and led them back to their rooms. Zhang Xiaohua noticed that their rooms were connected to the rooms on the right side of the courtyard. When the thin bamboo-like young man saw that everyone had left, he also walked forward with an apologetic smile and said, "Hello, Zhang Xiaohua. My surname is Tian, and my name is Chongxi. Everyone calls me Brother Shi. I'm a manager here. Those people just now didn't know anything, so please don't mind them. They don't have any bad intentions. They were just bored in the villa and wanted to have some fun. If you get along with them for a long time, you will know. Right, Elder Yuo, that one-armed old man. How did he arrange for you?" Zhang Xiaohua gratefully looked at the smiling young man and said, "I haven't said anything yet. Elder Yu hasn't returned yet. I don't know what to do with me." Tian Zhongxi said, "Why don't you come with me first and stay in my room for a while until Elder Yu comes back?" Zhang Xiaohua hesitated and said, "That's not good. I'll wait here." However, Tian Zhongxi picked up Zhang Xiaohua's small bag from the stone table and did not allow him to hesitate. He said, "Let's go. It's okay. It's already dark, and the wind at night is very cold. Don't catch a cold. If you get sick before you start farming, wouldn't it be very bad? After saying that, he walked away. Zhang Xiaohua helplessly followed behind, but his heart was filled with gratitude. Tian Zhongshi's room was the first in the inner door. It was a very simple room with a table and 2 chairs. There were 2 Kong beds in the room. One of them had a bedding while the other had a cabinet. There were also some items on the ground that seemed to be placed neatly. Tian Zhongxi placed Zhang Xiaohua's bag on the table and poured a cup of water for Zhang Xiaohua from the teapot on the table. He said with a pleasant expression, "Drink some water first and wait here. If it's not enough, pour it yourself. I'll go wash my face." Zhang Xiaohua thanked him and took the teacup. He hadn't had a sip of water since lunch. He was so thirsty that his throat was smoking. He didn't stand on ceremony after taking the teacup and drank it in one gulp. Then he poured another cup and drank it in one gulp before putting down the teacup. Tian Zhongxi handed the teacup to Zhang Xiaohua and took out a copper basin from the door to wash his face. While Zhang Xiaohua was waiting for Tian Zhongxi to return, he heard a shout from outside. "Zhang Xiaohua! Zhang Xiaohua, where are you?" Zhang Xiaohua knew that something was wrong and quickly ran out. As expected, the one-armed elder Yu was shouting loudly in front of the stone table under the shelf. Zhang Xiaohua ran in front of Elder Yu and said, "Hello, Elder Yu. I'll be sitting in Brother Shi's room for a while." Elder Yu's old face was still stiff as he said, "And since you know that I'm called Elder Yu, then you should know that I'm in charge of the medicine field. I don't care who brought you in, but since you're here, you have to listen to me. The higher-ups haven't assigned you any work yet, so you should first familiarize yourself with the environment." At this moment, Tian Zhongxi also walked over with a copper basin. Elder Yu called out to him, "Zhongxi, come over. You guys already knew each other just now, right? This is Zhang Xiaohua from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Don't assign any tasks for now. Familiarize yourself with the environment first. You can make the arrangements." When Tian Zhongxi heard the words Lotus Flower Escort Agency, his face couldn't help but twitch. However, he quickly put on a smile and said, "All right, Elder Yu, don't worry. I'll properly familiarize Zhang Xiaohua with the environment." That Lu heir left in a hurry and didn't even put away the bedding in his room. "Why don't we let Zhang Xiaohua stay on Lu heir's Kong bed?" Elder Yu nodded and said, "You can make the arrangements as you see fit." When he finished speaking, Elder Yu didn't even look back as he walked into the inner door and quickly disappeared. Tian Zhongxi then brought Zhang Xiaohua with him to a room. The moment Zhang Xiaohua entered the room, she smelled a strong stench of stinky feet. She looked up and saw a skinny middle-aged man wearing green clothes and a small hat sitting at the head of the Kong bed with his eyes narrowed. He was humming a little tune while rubbing his stinky feet with both hands. From time to time, he would even bring his fingers to his nose to sniff, as if his hand were stained with Yi Lai Xiang. Not only did Zhang Xiaohua furrow her brows, that Tian Zhongxi even called out, "Ma Jing." Then, he quickly walked over and pushed open the window. When Ma Jing heard Tian Zhongxi's call, he quickly jumped down from the Kong bed and put on his shoes. He rubbed his hands on his clothes and said, "Brother Shi, why did you come to my room? What's the matter?" Tian Zhongxi didn't walk over, but stood by the window and furrowed his brows as he said, "Ma Jing, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you're already in your 30s and you're still like this. No wonder you can't even find a wife." Ma Jing wasn't happy and said in a strange tone, "Brother Shi, can you not always talk about this? No one wants to marry me because no one has discovered my golden inlaid jade. I'm an inner beauty, unlike those pretty boys who need careful and deep communication to discover it." Not only was Tian Zhongxi happy, Zhang Xiaohua looked at this shifty-eyed wretched man who was only half a head taller than her and laughed out loud. Ma Jing immediately asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, could it be that you have an opinion?" Zhang Xiaohua quickly gave him a thumbs up and praised, "Brother Ma is a character. I just saw you and felt that you have a dignified appearance. How could I have an opinion? I'm just thinking about how to learn from you in the future." After saying this, a layer of goosebumps appeared on her skin. She thought to herself, "These flattering words aren't something an ordinary person can say. I'm new here, so it's better to be careful. This place isn't like the Guizhuang house. If I want to survive, it's better to change. Maybe it's good to be simple, But Lu Kai was right. Survival of the fittest. If I can't survive, how can I be simple? Inadvertently, Zhang Xiaohua's mind had matured greatly. An embarrassed country boy was gradually growing up in the world of mortals. When Ma Jing heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, he happily said, "Brother, there's nothing to say. In the future, I'll take care of you. Come sit." As he said this, he reached out to pull Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the pair of hands and felt uncomfortable in her heart. She quickly said, "Oh, wait a moment. Let's listen to what brother she has to say." When Ma Jing heard this, he stopped and nodded. "And what you said makes sense. Brother Shi, should we let Zhang Xiaohua stay on Luer's Kong?" Tian Zhongxi nodded and said, "Yes, it's already late today. There's no time to prepare. For the time being, let's let Zhang Xiaohua stay here. We'll see how Luer is doing." Ma Jing said, "No problem. Since you've entered our Huan Shi mountain village, you're our brother. Everything can be discussed. Come, brother, I'll put your bag down." As he said this, the pair of hands reached out to take Zhang Xiaohua's bag. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Xiaohua took 2 steps forward and walked to the empty Kong. She shook her hands and threw it on top of it, saying, "Brother Ma, you should rest more. I'll do this myself." Ma Jing stood there, chuckling and not saying anything. Tian Zhongxi glanced at Ma Jing and Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you can stay here for the time being. If there's anything you can't solve, come find me. You can't wear this here. However, what clothes you wear is a problem. I'll have to ask Elder you later." Ma Jing said from the side, "Brother Shi, Zhang Xiaohua's height is a bit small. However, there are many manservants like him in the village. The steward has many clothes of his size. Just find him a set. Why you have to ask Elder you?" Tian Zhongxi didn't say much to him. He smiled and turned to leave the room, leaving behind a sentence. Zhang Xiaohua was found from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. It's not good to use the style of the village. Ma Jing was stunned and muttered, "Lotus Flower Escort Agency?" He turned back to look at Zhang Xiaohua and laughed wildly. "You Lotus Flower Escort Agency? Ha ha." He laughed and sat back down on the Kong bed, then sat cross-legged. His hands naturally supported his legs as he said, "A child from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency? Who would believe that? However, this is fun." Then he curled his lips. He said to Zhang Xiaohua, "That, Brother Xiaohua, you can do as you please. From today onwards, we're roommates. You don't have to be polite. If there's anything you need, just tell Brother. Brother isn't afraid of trouble." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Okay, Brother Ma. I know. If there's anything I need, I'll definitely tell you." Although this roommate had a different quirk from ordinary people, Zhang Xiaohua was also very satisfied when she saw this spacious and bright room. This room was bigger than 2 of the rooms in her house. Staying here, she could sleep soundly at night. However, she didn't know how second brother was doing. There was also her mother and father at home. She had only left for a few days, and she was already missing them. However, Zhang Xiaohua immediately warned herself that she couldn't slack off or be homesick. Whatever she did now was so that she wouldn't bleed or lose her life in the future. It was all for the sake of her family's safety in the future. With this thought, the homesickness gradually faded. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. Chapter 75. Zhang Xiaohua tidied up the bedding on the Kong, opened his own bundle, and took out all the things he needed to use. Afterwards, he put the bundle into the small cabinet on the Kong. Although someone had lived on this Kong before, and Luer had just left, the things were tidied up neatly. Luer didn't leave anything behind, so Zhang Xiaohua didn't have to tidy it up for him. After tidying up everything, Zhang Xiaohua sat on the Kong, waiting to carefully look around the room. At this time, he heard his stomach rumble. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and stole a glance at Ma Jing. Sure enough, he was also looking in this direction. Ma Jing looked at Zhang Xiaohua and also looked at him. He laughed and said, "Brother Xiaohua, you must be hungry. Don't worry, wait a moment and we'll go eat." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Okay." Ever since he ate a little at noon in front of the Misty Mountain Villa, and lifted the stone lock at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency in the afternoon. He hadn't eaten anything until now. He didn't feel anything, but after drinking some water in Tian Zhongshi's room, he felt extremely hungry. Fortunately, not long after, Ma Jing came down from the Kong, picked up the copper basin, and washed his hands. He called out to Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Let's go, brother. Let's eat." Zhang Xiaohua happily followed behind Ma Jing and walked out of the room. The dining hall was inside the inner door. They walked through several inner doors in a disorderly manner. Zhang Xiaohua felt a bit dizzy as he followed Ma Jing. Each courtyard seemed to be the same size as the one they lived in. Some were occupied, while others were dark. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to ask too much and just followed along. Just when he was about to get lost, he finally saw Ma Jing stop and walk into a brightly lit hall. The dining hall was very large, unexpectedly large. As for how big it was, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't tell. He could only see that there were 6 rows of tables in the rectangular hall. Each row had about a dozen tables. However, there didn't seem to be anyone eating at this time. The entire hall seemed empty. Ma Jing entered the hall and went straight to a corner. Zhang Xiaohua looked around the hall and followed behind Ma Jing. What a joke. There were so many tables. Who knew where to sit? However, when she sat in the corner, Zhang Xiaohua found that she was wrong. The other tables were empty. Only the table in the corner had bowls, chopsticks, and food. Where else could she sit? Ma Jing had already found a seat in front of the table and sat down. When Zhang Xiaohua approached, she found a problem. There were a total of 3 tables with food in front of her. One of the tables was empty, and the other 2 tables were full of people in green clothes and small hats. It seemed that there were no extra seats. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but wonder, where did Lu Er usually sit to eat? Ma Jing picked up the bowl and chopsticks and was about to eat. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua standing there, he was stunned. He looked up again and smiled, saying, "There are no seats. Xiaohua, you sit at the empty table." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and was about to go over. At this time, a strange voice sounded. "You just came and you're already picky about food? You don't even look at yourself. You want to eat first-class food?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She looked back and didn't see who said it. However, Zhang Xiaohua looked carefully at the food on the empty table and then looked back at the food Ma Jing and the others were eating. Her heart couldn't help but move. There was indeed a difference. Not to mention what the food on the 2 tables were. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't distinguish clearly. However, from the plates and bowls, she could see the difference. The plates that Ma Jing and the others were eating were obviously bigger, and the number of plates were fewer. On the other table, there were obviously more plates, but the plates were smaller. Of course, the quality of the plates and bowls were different, but Zhang Xiaohua didn't know. At this time, even if Zhang Xiaohua was stupid, she knew that he couldn't eat on that table. What's more, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't stupid. She just didn't go out to the countryside and didn't see the world. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua stopped. There was a trace of doubt in her heart. What did this Ma Jing mean? Just as he was thinking about it, someone else came in. Zhang Xiaohua looked up and saw that it was the 4 men in tight clothes. They walked straight to the empty table and started eating. They didn't even look at the people at the other 2 tables. Instead, it was the simple middle-aged man who had patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. He glanced at Zhang Xiaohua but didn't say anything, nor did he invite him over to eat. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was abnormally embarrassed and didn't know what to do, a voice sounded behind her. "Zhang Xiaohua, why don't you sit down and eat?" Zhang Xiaohua looked back. It turned out that Tian Zhongxi was walking over. Zhang Xiaohua said, "The tables are full. There's no place to sit." Tian Zhongxi was stunned. Looking at the people at the 2 tables who were eating, he couldn't help but frown. Immediately, he smiled and said, "He there is. Come with me." After that, he walked to Ma Jing's side and pulled out a stool from under the table. He said to Zhang Xiaohua, "You can sit here." Then he patted Ma Jing and the person next to Ma Jing on the shoulder and said, "You two, make way. Make room." Ma Jing said with a cheeky smile, "Brother Shi, there's no place. How can we make room?" Tian Zhongxi glared at him and said, "Lu Er usually sits here. Zhang Xiaohua is even thinner than Lu Er. How could she not sit?" The other person didn't say anything and moved away. When Ma Jing saw this, he had no choice but to move. Although the space wasn't big, it was enough for Zhang Xiaohua. Tian Zhongxi walked to another table. The person who was eating quickly pulled out a stool from under the table, leaving a big space for the people beside him. Zhang Xiaohua sat on the stool and wolfed down the sumptuous dinner. Not to mention that his stomach was already growling from hunger. Just the delicious food on the table made his mouth water. Our poor Xiaohua. When had she ever seen such a sumptuous meal? This plate of meat, who knew how it was made? It was even better than braised pork. What was that plate of meat? It was even better than streaky pork. And this fish, why was its head so big? Where did its body go? And this staple food was also unusually sweet. Alas, if only Grandma could eat it. As he thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua ate slowly. At this time, he noticed that almost the people next to him had stopped eating. Everyone's eyes were fixed on his bowl. There were sneers, mockery, disdain, smiles, and gratification. There were also people who whispered, "One look and I can tell that they are from the countryside. They have never seen food before." Unfortunately, at this time, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have adapted to everyone's gazes. He had a cool breeze on the mountain feeling. He ate by himself and ignored the gazes of others. When everyone saw this, they felt very bored and didn't pay attention to him anymore. However, they still ate and chatted. Zhang Xiaohua even noticed that those people were looking at other first-class meals while eating. He even whispered in his ear, "We all do the same job. Why can't they eat first-class meals and we can't?" However, this had nothing to do with Zhang Xiaohua. It was good enough to eat these every day. Who cared about first-class meals? Although there were many varieties of food there, it was not as good as here. Eat more, eat well. This was Zhang Xiaohua's theme in the dining room tonight. Although Zhang Xiaohua had eaten to his heart's content, there was still a lot of food left on the table. The others didn't seem to have eaten much either. Looking at the leftovers, Zhang Xiaohua's only thought was how good it would be if he could give it to his pig. This thought lingered in his mind until he followed everyone back to the house. Back in the house, Ma Jing and Zhang Xiaohua each drank a cup of water and returned to their calm. Ma Jing was still picking at his smelly feet. Zhang Xiaohua looked at him and couldn't help but think disdainfully, "Ma Jing's feet are going to be given to others someday? You should take advantage of this opportunity to pick at them properly." However, the smell in the house was getting worse and worse. Zhang Xiaohua even thought maliciously whether Lu Er had used his mother's death to corpse escape because of this. At this time, he wanted Lu Er to come back quickly so that he could move to another house. He didn't think about whether he could still stay in Huanxi Mountain Villa if Lu Er came back. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't stand it anymore. He got up and walked to the window. He opened the window and looked at the night outside. He took a few deep breaths and asked Ma Jing without leaving a trace, "Brother Ma, why were there two kinds of dishes when we were eating just now? Can you tell me?" Ma Jing took the finger away from his nose and said with his small eyes narrowed, "Xiaohua, you see clearly. You are very motivated. You know the principle of asking when you don't understand. You can make progress. Then I won't hide it and tell you." After that, his eyes looked through the window, through the night, and also through time and space. It seemed that he had returned to the past. Ma Jing's deep voice sounded in Zhang Xiaohua's ears. A long, long time ago, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "A long, long time ago?" Ma Jing answered, "Yes, before the new year." Bang! Ma Jing looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who fell, and thought, "He is still a child. Even when he falls, he is still handsome. Birds of a feather flock together. Only he is qualified to live in the same house with me." Then he asked with concern, "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing. I was tripped by your thoughts of traveling through time and space," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Ma Jing continued, "Before the new year, the people in charge of the medicine field in Huanxi Mountain Villa were us manservants. Although it was very hard and we didn't eat the best food, everyone was very happy and enjoyed a peaceful and harmonious life. However, since the new year, it seems that starting from the 18th of the first month, a few more medicine fields were opened on the side of the medicine fields. Do you know what kind of medicine it is?" Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss. "I don't know." Ma Jing said, "Why don't you guess?" Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss. I really don't know. I have never planted medicine before and have never seen it. How can I guess? Yes. Ma Jing nodded and said, I guess you won't be able to guess. Then, what kind of medicine is it? Zhang Xiaohua asked eagerly. Ma Jing said slowly, This, I don't know either. Bang! Zhang Xiaohua's head fell to the ground. Ma Jing exclaimed again, What a handsome posture. This is a bit of a joke. Please vote for me. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. Chapter 76. Ma Jing continued. We're the ones who opened the fields, Xiaohua. Did you know? Opening a field is very tiring. We're all so tired that we shed a layer of skin. That's right. Have you opened a field before? You're so young, so you definitely haven't. You probably don't know how hard it is to open a field. When the cold wind blows and the snowflakes fall, our hands are all frozen and cracked. Look, my fingers haven't even healed yet. When the wind blows and it rains, my bones ache. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the dancing Ma Jing. On one hand, she wanted to kick his mouth until it was broken so that he could finish his words. On the other hand, she was afraid that he would put his fingers in front of her and let her see them. She didn't dare go forward. She secretly despised him in her heart. This hand is frozen and cracked, but the bones are still injured. Who knows what Ma Jing is made of? Seeing that Ma Jing still wanted to continue, Zhang Xiaohua quickly said, Brother Ma, I've also done this work of opening a field before. It's really tiring, and you should continue talking about the medicine field. Ahem. Oh, you've opened a field before. Then you should know the hardships of opening a field. Ma Jing smiled and continued. After opening the field, we were chased away and not allowed to come close. The pharmacy hall's hall master by an elder, he personally planted the seeds of the medicine. After planting them, we thought that they would leave it to us to take care of. Did you know? Zhang Xiaohua. This is definitely a rare medicine. If we take care of it well, the manager will definitely give us more money. They'll definitely give us a raise in salary. With a raise in salary, our lives will be better. Then I'll definitely earn a lot of money. When the time comes, I'll definitely be able to marry Little Peach. As he spoke, Ma Jing's deep eyes seemed to pierce through the night and return to the future. Zhang Xiaohua quickly said, Who is this Little Peach? Little Peach is drunk in fragrance houses. Ahem. Ma Jing immediately stopped and said, Oh, I've said too much. Even if we don't get a raise, the higher-ups will still see how precious we are. Giving me a bit more responsibility and making me a manager is also good. But then Ma Jing said bitterly that they actually separated these few fields from the other fields and even set up rules to prevent us from getting close. They picked 4 sons of bitches from the Misty School's pharmacy to steal our jobs and put them in charge of those few fields. The most important thing is their treatment is actually better than ours. Not only do they get 3 taels of silver a month, but their meals are also better than ours. They can actually eat first-class meals. Moreover, when they go on business trips, their carriages are all first class, and the hotels they stay in are also 4 stars higher than ours. Tell me, isn't this infuriating? It's not just me. All of us brothers are holding back our anger. We want to teach them a lesson, but Ma Jing, who was gnashing his teeth just now, stuttered a little. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, But what? Ma Jing sighed, his head hung low. His finger stopped drawing circles in the air and said, But we don't know any martial arts. How can we beat them? You guys don't know any martial arts? Zhang Xiaohua cried out in alarm. What's wrong? Is it strange that we don't know any martial arts? Who said that servants need to know martial arts? Ma Jing said unhappily when he saw Zhang Xiaohua cry out. But Zhang Xiaohua couldn't continue and thought, You guys don't know any martial arts. Who can teach me martial arts? But what? Don't tell me you know martial arts. That's right. You came from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. You definitely know some martial arts. Brother, when will you teach your big brother a few moves? Ma Jing seemed to have woken up from his daze and wanted to get down from the ground to find Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua quickly waved her hand and said, Brother Ma, do I look like I know any martial arts? Ma Jing looked Zhang Xiaohua up and down and said doubtfully, I can't tell. I heard that the disciples of the Misty School all start practicing martial arts at the age of 4 or 5. At your age, you're already very strong. Zhang Xiaohua smiled wryly and said, if I started practicing martial arts at the age of 4 or 5, would I still be able to come to the villa to grow herbs? Ma Jing tilted his head and thought for a moment before saying, that's true. Then you would have been at the Misty Mountain Villa and not at the Huanqi Villa. As he said this, he sat down again and began to do his idle business. However, Ma Jing immediately asked curiously, then how did you end up at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, and how did you come here? Isn't the Lotus Flower Escort Agency a lot stronger than this place? Zhang Xiaohua smiled wryly and explained, it's not that I don't want to be at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. It's just that I wanted to be a guard at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, but they didn't want me. Coincidentally, just as I was talking to Fourth Master when Big Sister Chiu Tong from the villa went over to ask for someone and took a fancy to me. I didn't have anywhere to go anyways, so I came here. Ma Jing narrowed his eyes and said, that's right. Guards need to be escorted. With your small body, who would dare to take you? What? Chiu Tong, how did she take a fancy to you? Do you know her? Ma Jing's small eyes immediately widened and shot out a divine light. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly explained, how could I know Big Sister Chiu Tong? She saw that I was pitiful and didn't have anywhere to go, so she came looking for me. Ma Jing nodded and said, that's right. Chiu Tong is a kind-hearted girl. Not only is she a good person, but her figure is also very good. That chest, sigh. Ma Jing's deep gaze seemed to pierce through the night and space to see Chiu Tong, who was busy taking care of Oyen. Ma Jing mumbled to himself for a while and suddenly smiled mysteriously at Zhang Xiaohua. Brother, although Chiu Tong was the one who found you, don't have any improper thoughts about her. Chiu Tong is everyone's dream lover. Who knows how many people have a crush on her, did you know? The one next door? Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. This Ma Jing wasn't just an ordinary gossiper. He'd spied on most of the privacy of the dozen or so people in the courtyard. At the same time, this made Zhang Xiaohua secretly raise his guard. He had to avoid this gossipy man if he had any matters to discuss. After eating and drinking to his fill, Zhang Xiaohua was still listening to Ma Jing's endless chatter at first. As he listened, he wondered how he was going to sleep with the smell of feet in the house. In the end, as he listened, his eyes became blurry and he unknowingly fell asleep. It wasn't until Ma Jing's mouth was dry and he got up to drink some water that he realized that Zhang Xiaohua had already fallen asleep. He had played the lute to a cow for so long, so he could only sulkily drink some water, kick off his shoes, and go out to visit. It was late at night, but the house wasn't quiet at all. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua had fallen asleep early. Ever since Ma Jing fell asleep, his earth-shattering snoring continued like a long river. Occasionally, he would say something in his sleep that couldn't be understood. Occasionally, he would stop talking and only the sound of teeth grinding could be heard. Sigh, poor Xiaohua. Fortunately, he didn't wake up at night. Otherwise, wouldn't he be so frightened that he wouldn't be able to sleep? Well, even if he woke up, he would be immediately fainted by the stench in the house. There was no chance for him to hear so much noise. It turned out that Ma Jing didn't wash his feet. However, our Xiaohua couldn't smell the smell of Ma Jing's stinky feet at this time, because his breath was long and faint. If you put your finger on Zhang Xiaohua's nose, you couldn't feel that he was breathing. Perhaps he wasn't breathing air. Perhaps at this time, he wasn't breathing through his mouth and nose, but through all the pores on his body. No one knew. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua woke up on time. Before he could figure out where he was, the pungent stench immediately rushed into his nose. Zhang Xiaohua moved like a rabbit and rushed to the door like an arrow. After rushing out, he took a few deep breaths of fresh air and then remembered that he was in Huanqi Villa and his situation. Looking back at the hut, which was no different from other rooms, he really didn't want to go in. Seeing that the yard was still quiet, he thought that everyone was still sleeping, so he walked out of the round door outside. When he came here yesterday, it was already dark, so he didn't see very clearly. Although he had a general understanding of Huanqi Villa, he was still frightened by the scene in front of him when he went out now. In front of him was the foot of a mountain. At first glance, there were many farmlands and some woods, and there were countless continuous houses beside it. Is this Huanchi Villa? Why is it even bigger than the Guizhuang house? The mountains seemed to be in the villa. There were many trees and farmlands on the mountain, which were in the shape of stairs. Zhang Xiaohua was confused for a while. Can people farm on the mountain? After the shock, Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to think more. Since he had already entered Huanchi Villa, there would be plenty of opportunities to go there in the future. These days, he had been shocked by many things outside. Now thinking about it, even if he didn't learn martial arts, this trip was not in vain. Thinking of martial arts, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He faced the rising sun and gulped down a mouthful of warm water. His whole body felt comfortable. This was already his daily homework. After that, he recalled the 6 harmonies fist that he had seen people practice at the Lotus Escort Agency yesterday. He began to practice it one by one. However, after a few moves, he forgot the rest. He racked his brain and tried to think for a while. He forced himself to practice a few more times, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember it. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be annoyed with himself. Could it be that he was not cut out for martial arts? But since my second brother can learn so fast, and I am his brother, I can't be so different from him, right? Zhang Xiaohua painfully thought. When he turned around, he saw a pair of eyes looking at him. It turned out to be the middle-aged man in martial arts yesterday. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly went over to salute. The man also smiled and saluted back. Then he walked to the side, took up a posture, and began to practice. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know what kind of boxing he was practicing. He only felt that his steps were like dragons and tigers, and his punches were very impressive. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were full of stars, and he was very envious. Not long after, the other 3 people also came out in martial arts clothes. They stood in different positions and began to practice martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua watched from afar. When they finished practicing and returned to the small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua followed them back. Looking at the backs of the 4 people, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but think, if I can have their skills, I should be able to protect my family's safety. But I don't know if they are willing to teach me. Chapter 77. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua already knew that streaky pork wasn't the most delicious thing in the world. Being able to eat streaky pork wasn't his dream, and martial arts was his new streaky pork. However, how to eat this streaky pork still needed to be thought about. Looking at the backs of the 4 people, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but think to himself. The courtyard was still as quiet as ever. That bunch of lazy pigs in green robes and hats must still be sleeping. How could they compete with the disciples of the ethereal sect like this? Do they have the strength? Although he had just arrived yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua himself felt that there was no chance. Perhaps they knew that he couldn't do it, so they wanted to satisfy their appetite with their words. However, looking at the small room where he slept last night, Zhang Xiaohua felt a headache coming on. How could Lu Er have such a roommate? Couldn't he find someone of a higher level? Pinching his nose, Zhang Xiaohua opened the window. Although it was already summer, there was still a cool morning breeze. The dirty smell in the room was gone with the wind. Zhang Xiaohua then slowly walked in. After finding a copper basin to wash his face, Zhang Xiaohua sat on the Kong bed and drank some water. At this time, Ma Jing on the opposite side turned over, stretched his waist, and sat up. His mouth said, "Only I know who will wake up first in the dream." Bang! This time, it wasn't Zhang Xiaohua who fell, but the cup that fell on the Kong bed. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly tidied up the bedding on the Kong bed and asked with a wry smile, "Brother Ma, why is it so poetic?" Ma Jing shook his head and said, "It was a dream at night. How is it? Do you think Brother Ma is poetic?" Zhang Xiaohua praised again and again. "Shit is amazing." Breakfast was still eaten in the hall, and the dishes were still different. Zhang Xiaohua already knew the reason, so naturally, he didn't find it strange and ate with relish. The others could not do the same. They mocked and ridiculed them, throwing strange words at them, but the 4 of them did not seem to hear them at all. They continued to eat as if Zhang Xiaohua was carrying the food, and from time to time, The murderous glares directed at them were just side dishes. They hurriedly finished their food and left, leaving behind a bunch of resentful gazes. After everyone finished eating and left, Zhang Xiaohua patted his belly and left the dining hall. Looking at the leftovers on the table and thinking about how they ate, he couldn't help but wonder, wasn't the work in the medicine field heavy? Why did they eat so little? Did they have the energy to work? Zhang Xiaohua returned to the room and saw that Ma Jing had finished tidying up and was about to go out, so he quickly followed behind. However, when he passed the outer door, he was stopped by Tian Zhongxi. Tian Zhongxi smiled and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, you're new here, so don't rush to work. You wait here for a while. I'll arrange it for them, and then I'll come over to greet you. You can first understand the situation with me." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately responded, "Okay, you go ahead. I'll wait here." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua standing at the door, Tian Zhongxi took Ma Jing and the 4 people who were dressed in neat clothes and left first. Zhang Xiaohua didn't find it strange, but Ma Jing secretly asked Tian Zhongxi, "Brother Shi, can't you just let me take care of Zhang Xiaohua? Why do you have to take care of him personally?" Tian Zhongxi said, "Although Zhang Xiaohua came from the Lotus Escort Agency, his background and other things haven't been clarified yet. Although it seems that there's no problem, it's better to wait until it's clear. That's what the supervisor said last night. We'll just do as he said." Ma Jing was stunned and said with a crying face, "Why didn't you say so earlier? Yesterday, I told him a lot about our mountain villa's secrets." Tian Zhongxi was stunned and then said with a smile, "What secrets can you know? When you know, it won't be a secret anymore. Even I don't know the important secrets of our mountain villa. So how do you know? Don't think too much. Zhang Xiaohua shouldn't have any problems, otherwise he wouldn't have let Xiao Tong bring him back." Only then did Ma Jing relax. Zhang Xiaohua stood outside and watched Tian Zhongxi and the others walk away. When he heard footsteps behind him, he turned around to see Elder Yu walking over. Zhang Xiaohua quickly bowed in greeting. Elder Yu walked over and patted him on the shoulder with a smile. "Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you want to learn martial arts?" Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. "That's right, Elder Yu." Elder Yu asked again, "Yesterday, I heard from Xiao Tong that you're very strong. You can actually lift 500 jin of stone weights?" Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. "Elder Yu, my strength is a bit strong. I also lifted 2 stone weights yesterday, but I don't know how heavy they are." Elder Yu said, "It's a good thing that you want to learn martial arts, but you've already passed the best period to learn martial arts. Practicing martial arts for self-defense is not a problem. Do well, and I'll find someone to teach you. How about it?" Zhang Xiaohua couldn't believe his ears. He said in surprise, "Really, Elder Yu, you're not lying to me, right?" Elder Yu smiled. "Why would I lie to you? You'll naturally know in the future." Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "Haha, that's great. I'll definitely train better than second brother." Elder Yu asked, "Your second brother entered the Lotus Flower Escort Agency yesterday, right?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Yes. Third Master, one of the Lotus Flower Escort Agencies, said that my aptitude is very good. I'll be successful if I train a bit more." Elder Yu smiled and encouraged Zhang Xiaohua. "And if your second brother can be successful, then you won't be bad either. Train well and do your family proud." Zhang Xiaohua bowed again. "Thank you, Elder Yu, for your help. I will definitely do my best." After that, Elder Yu also left. However, Elder Yu thought to himself as he walked, "This Zhang Xiaohua looks like an ordinary child. It's fine if he's strong, but why does the young miss value him so much and want him to learn martial arts?" Actually, Elder Yu didn't understand Oyan's intentions. Oyan didn't really think highly of Zhang Xiaohua. It was just that yesterday, Xiao Tong's love for Zhang Xiaohua had made her think of her own elder brother. She was just casually saying it out of compassion. Besides, it was just a matter of saying a few words for a high and mighty person like her to let a small guard learn some martial arts, let alone a child who had long passed the age of learning martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua stood outside the door and waited for a meal before Tian Zhongxi returned. He brought Zhang Xiaohua around for a stroll. It was just as Ma Jing had said. There were all kinds of strange plants in Huanxi Manor. There were grains, flowers, herbs, and so on. There were different people taking care of them. Tian Zhongxi and the others were in charge of planting these herbs. Tian Zhongxi pointed at the herb field from afar and gave Zhang Xiaohua a rough description of the herbs. Zhang Xiaohua had never seen them before, so she could only memorize them. Fortunately, it was just planting, weeding, and watering. It wasn't much different from taking care of the crops. Zhang Xiaohua had done farm work for a long time at home, so she didn't have to worry about these things. In the next few days, Tian Zhongxi still brought him around and didn't let him do any work. Even when Tian Zhongxi was busy with the herb field and didn't have time to take care of Zhang Xiaohua, he didn't let Zhang Xiaohua do any work. Zhang Xiaohua was very strange. She just watched people practice martial arts in the morning, followed him around during the day, slept under a tree when she had nothing to do, and listened to Ma Jing talk nonsense at night. This simple life was very boring. Zhang Xiaohua had come here to learn martial arts, but he was thrown here instead. Although he had never eaten anything before and heard things that he had never thought of before, he still felt uncomfortable. Not to mention the stinky feet in the house every night. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua also felt embarrassed that she had just arrived. But later, she couldn't stand it anymore. She had to indirectly tell Ma Jing that it would be best if he could wash his feet before sleeping. But that Ma Jing still did things his own way. Don't you think this made Zhang Xiaohua feel vexed? In the end, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to open the window to sleep at night for some fresh air. However, it was the same every night before going to sleep. In the morning, Ma Jing would close the window again. The air in the house was still very dirty. Ma Jing must have woken up from the cold at night and got up to close the window himself. That afternoon, Ma Jing mysteriously looked for Zhang Xiaohua and whispered to her, "Xiaohua, do you think my feet are very smelly?" Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "It's not too smelly, but a little." Ma Jing nodded and said, "I know. From today onwards, you don't have to worry." "Really?" Zhang Xiaohua asked in disbelief. "You've started washing your feet?" "No." Ma Jing shook his head and said, "I just told Brother Shi about this." "Brother, she said to let you move into his house." "Really? Brother Shi said that to you?" Zhang Xiaohua asked. "Yes, that's right. Brother Shi said that." Ma Jing nodded affirmatively. Zhang Xiaohua said gratefully, "Brother Ma, you're really a good person. Thank you." Ma Jing chuckled and didn't say anything. He went out to the herb field. In the afternoon, Zhang Xiaohua packed her things, which were the small bag and a roll of bedding. In the small courtyard, the rooms were not locked. In the evening, she put her things on Tian Zhongxi's empty Kong bed. Before dinner, Ma Jing and the others came back. They didn't see Tian Zhongxi. Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't thank Tian Zhongxi and followed Ma Jing and the others to the dining room to eat. While they were eating, Tian Zhongxi came in. He was covered in dust and seemed to have not washed. As soon as he sat down, he picked up the bowl and chopsticks and quickly ate. The person next to him asked softly, "Brother Shi, the water is not ready yet?" Tian Zhongxi was eating and answered vaguely, "Yes, not yet. I still have to do it later." Zhang Xiaohua saw that he was eating in a hurry and didn't dare to go forward immediately. When he was almost done eating and was about to get up to leave, she went forward and said, "Brother Shi, thank you. I put the bedding on the Kong bed first." Tian Zhongxi was stunned and asked, "Thank me for what? Where did you put the bedding?" Zhang Xiaohua said strangely, "Brother Shi, didn't you let me stay in your house? I put my bedding on the empty Kong bed." When Tian Zhongxi heard this, his face darkened and said, "When did I tell you to stay in my house? Can you just enter other people's houses?" After saying that, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua to explain and hurriedly left. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. Chapter 78. Tian Zhongxi's words were like a clap of thunder, shocking Zhang Xiaohua on the spot. What was going on? Zhang Xiaohua looked back at Ma Jing and saw that he was eating happily. It seemed that he had already hidden Little Peach in a golden house. The smile on his face was deeply hidden behind the wrinkles of his dark and thin skin. Under the light of the fire in the dining room, the excitement in his eyes could be seen. There was even a flush on his forehead. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand something and was furious. Although he was a country boy and had not seen much of the world, he was not someone who could be easily schemed against and bullied. He did not offend Ma Jing. He just advised him to wash his feet and pay attention to hygiene. He was tricked by him and made Tian Zhongxi despise him. This was too hateful. Zhang Xiaohua gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He walked towards Ma Jing. However, when he just took 2 steps, he saw Ma Jing's fearless look. Suddenly, an idea arose in his mind. It immediately extinguished the burning anger in his heart. If he went over like this, Ma Jing would not admit it. How could he be reasonable? Moreover, these people around him were usually scoundrels. They could tell who was near and who was far away. How could they help him? Besides, even if he went over and beat Ma Jing, what was the result? Could it be that he was driven out before he learned martial arts? The connected questions made Zhang Xiaohua calm down. He stopped and looked at Ma Jing. He did not speak anymore. He returned to his seat and ate quietly. Apart from Ma Jing, the rest of the people in the green robes and small hats were all gossiping among themselves. Naturally, no one paid too much attention to it. But the middle-aged man next to him heard it clearly. He even saw Zhang Xiaohua's later actions clearly. When Zhang Xiaohua sat quietly, he withdrew his gaze and continued to eat. After dinner, Zhang Xiaohua took the things he packed from Tian Zhongxi's room and moved them back to Ma Jing's room. However, Zhang Xiaohua was not stupid enough to ask him face to face why he did so. This night, he did not listen to Ma Jing's nonsense. Instead, he went to the yard and walked slowly, thinking as he walked. Although it was not a big deal, it taught Zhang Xiaohua a very profound lesson. It gave him a very special understanding of the world. Between people, there was not only harmony and hatred, but also many strange things. Different people would do different things. Maybe it was kindness, maybe it was malice, maybe it was just to tease you, maybe it was just to watch the show. In short, there was no way to know a person's heart. Everything had to be carefully considered before one could believe it. Bad people did not all have the face of a bad person. However, every night before going to bed, Zhang Xiaohua would open the window, whether it was sunny or rainy. After a few more days, Zhang Xiaohua's lazy and free life came to an end. Zhang Xiaohua did not like this kind of life that others envied, so he happily accepted the task given to him by Tian Zhongxi. This task might be a little difficult for the group of servants in cyan clothes and hats, but for Zhang Xiaohua, a child who grew up in the field since childhood, it was not a challenge at all. Early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua wore the cyan clothes and hats brought by Tian Zhongxi and went out with Ma Jing in high spirits. His task was to learn all the work of the herbal field from Ma Jing as soon as possible. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's happy appearance, Ma Jing could not help but secretly despise him. He was really a country bumpkin. If he did not work for a day, his hands would be itchy. He could only be a farmer for a lifetime. Thinking of the matter of teasing Zhang Xiaohua a few days ago and recalling Zhang Xiaohua's defeated appearance, Ma Jing secretly laughed in his heart. Humph, who said that Ma Jing, was the most laughed at in the Huanqi Mountain Villa? Isn't there another little bumpkin here? Isn't he also played in the palm of my hand? Ma Jing despised Zhang Xiaohua and could also tease him in daily life. But in the herbal field, Ma Jing did not dare to be careless at all. What to do and what to pay attention to, he meticulously told Zhang Xiaohua. He was very clear that the herbs in the Huanqi Mountain Villa were the most important. At this moment, he made a little trouble for Zhang Xiaohua, or neglected to mention a little. If something went wrong in the future, not only would Zhang Xiaohua be punished, but he would also be involved. Ma Jing was very clear about this point, so he did not dare to hide anything at all. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua did not know what he was thinking. She thought how difficult it would be to take care of the herbs, but along the way, she heard that there was not much difference between planting crops, only some subtle differences. So she wrote it down in detail. She also took a small medicine hoe and medicine shovel and followed Ma Jing to loosen the soil and shovel the grass. It was easy. After a day, when Ma Jing asked, Zhang Xiaohua's answer was very satisfactory. Moreover, looking at Zhang Xiaohua's appearance of working, Ma Jing was also a little relieved. So after 2 days, Ma Jing told Tian Zhongxi that Zhang Xiaohua could work alone. Tian Zhongxi still did not believe his ears. In the past, there were new people in his manservant team, but he only dared to let them go after a long time. Was Ma Jing fooling him? Thinking about Ma Jing's usual behavior, he was more certain. However, after he also took care of Zhang Xiaohua for a day, he really believed that Zhang Xiaohua could work alone. He felt a little guilty that he had wronged Ma Jing. After he asked Zhang Xiaohua in detail, he then found out the reason. This kind of medicinal herbs was no different from planting crops. In the past, the manservants recruited by the Huangqi Mountain Villa were mostly from the vicinity of Pingyang City and had a certain family background. How could the poor children of farmers be qualified to be taken in by the Huangqi Mountain Villa? Only Zhang Xiaohua was an exception. She was a child from a poor family and had farmed before. The bunch of manservants under him were all arrogant at home. How could they work in the fields? Therefore, it gave them the illusion that the work in this medicinal herb field was very complicated and difficult to do. After thinking through this, Tian Zhongxi could not help but let out a long sigh. Habitual thinking killed people. After that, Zhang Xiaohua finally got rid of the decadent days of reaping without sowing and returned to the fields that she was familiar with. The small medicinal hoe and spade were really cute. It was much more convenient to use than the big hoe at home. Zhang Xiaohua also had the strength now. She could easily finish a day's work. These days were really comfortable. However, Zhang Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised by what happened next. This morning, Zhang Xiaohua was still watching the middle-aged man in martial arts training. However, that person did not leave immediately after he was done. Instead, he walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Your name is Zhang Xiaohua." Zhang Xiaohua blinked and nodded. Then, she heard a very pleasant sentence. "Miss asked me to teach you martial arts when I have the time." Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and said, "Really?" That person smiled and said, "It's true. My name is He Tian Shu. You can call me team leader He. Wait for me here after dinner tonight. I will start teaching you today." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned again. She was obviously happy. He Tian Shu saw that Zhang Xiaohua did not say anything and knew how he was feeling. He patted his shoulder and turned to leave. Only Zhang Xiaohua was left digesting the news that she wanted to hear the most in her life. This miss was really a good person. Zhang Xiaohua almost wanted to rush into the inner courtyard and worship the Mississippi. However, thinking about the inner courtyard's complexity, if she got lost, wouldn't she be chased out as a peeping Tom? Only then did she extinguish the thought. In short, her gratitude towards O Yin could not be expressed with words. She instantly placed this unknown miss on the same level as her sister-in-law, Lu Qian, in her heart. Zhang Xiaohua spent the whole day waiting anxiously and excitedly. There were even a few times when she almost made mistakes in the medicine field. This made Zhang Xiaohua immediately alert. How could she forget about this small beginning? Calm down, calm down. Zhang Xiaohua warned herself as she worked hard. From time to time, she would raise her head to look at the sky. Why was the sun going so slowly today? In the torment, the sun finally set in the west. Tian Zhongxi's shout came from afar. Zhang Xiaohua immediately rushed out of the medicine field. She had long left her calmness behind. This state of mind that was not happy with external gains and not sad for oneself, Zhang Xiaohua was still far from it. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly finished her dinner and came to the outer courtyard early. The moonlight was like water, but Zhang Xiaohua's mood was like boiling water. She was so excited. The wish that she had been thinking about for a long time was finally going to be realized. Who would still calm down? But why was He Tian Shu not here yet? When she was eating just now, she saw that he was almost done eating. Usually, he would finish eating early and come out early. Why was he so slow now? Zhang Xiaohua walked back and forth under the moonlight, anxiously waiting. After an unknown amount of time, she finally heard footsteps coming from the courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly went to greet them. Sure enough, it was He Tian Shu. Zhang Xiaohua happily said, "Captain He, you've come." He Tian Shu looked at Xiaohua and said with a straight face, "Xiaohua, although I'm teaching you martial arts, I'm not your real master. Captain He is just a title. Do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua blankly nodded. He Tianshu said again. Although I'm not your real master, I'll teach you to the best of my ability. It just depends on how much you can learn. Zhang Xiaowan nodded again. He Tianshu continued. Then I'll tell you the first thing today. When practicing martial arts, you must practice with a calm heart. Don't be impatient. Look at you now. How can you practice martial arts in peace? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she immediately understood a lot. Yes, what had she become today? She was completely dazzled by this good news. She immediately gathered her thoughts and calmly said to He Tianshu, "Thank you, Captain He, for teaching me." At this time, He Tianshu nodded in satisfaction and said, "That's good. No matter what happens in the future, you must be as calm as an ancient well. Come with me." Geyser suggests that I update faster. I plan to start from chapter 90 and try to write 5,000 words per chapter. However, I'll still update every day. Thank you, reading friends. Please bookmark. Thank you. Chapter 79. He Tianshu brought Zhang Xiaohua to a spacious area and asked, "Xiaohua, I heard that you've never learned martial arts before?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Yes, I've never learned before." He Tianshu asked again, "You're quite strong, right?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded again and said, "Yes, I didn't feel it before, but since the new year, I feel that my strength has been increasing. I heard that the stone weight I lifted at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency was 500 pounds. He Tianshu said, "That's good. Give me a punch with all your strength and give it a try." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a bit and asked, "Use all my strength?" He Tianshu said, "Yes, it's okay. Use all your strength. Don't be afraid that I'll get hurt." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Okay then, be careful." After saying this, Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and used all her strength to raise her right fist and punch towards He Tianshu's body. He Tianshu looked at the incoming fist and also raised his right palm, but he only used 20% of his strength, thinking that it was more than enough. When the two people's fists collided, He Tianshu knew that he was wrong and immediately used another 30% of his strength to block Zhang Xiaohua's fist. His body swayed slightly, and his right arm became numb from the shock. He thought to himself, "This Xiaohua really does have 500 pounds of strength. She's born with divine strength." Zhang Xiaohua was even more shocked and thought, "Oh my God, Captain He is too strong." When my fist hit him, his body only swayed a little. The difference between whether or not he knows martial arts is too big. This won't do. I must learn martial arts properly. He Tianshu's right arm was numb, and he couldn't raise it. He wanted to use his left hand to rub it and move it, but when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's worshipful expression, he was a bit embarrassed to do so. He could only secretly frown and praise Zhang Xiaohua. "Not bad, Xiaohua. Your strength is not small." Then he patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and moved his shoulders without a trace, saying, "Now I'll officially start teaching you martial arts." Zhang Xiaohua nodded excitedly. "Thank you, Captain He." He Tianshu smiled, then got into a horse stance and said, "Watch my posture and learn from me. This is called the horse stance. Come, you too." Zhang Xiaohua carefully looked at He Tianshu's posture and imitated him in the horse stance. He Tianshu stood up and pointed out a few of Zhang Xiaohua's mistakes. He then said, "Good, you did a good job. From now on, you'll practice the horse stance for 2 hours every morning and night. Today, you can do it first. I will come over later to take a look." After saying that, he patted his butt and left. Zhang Xiaohua's head was filled with confusion. She kept shouting in her heart, "Practice martial arts. Practice martial arts. I want to practice martial arts. I want to practice martial arts. How can you just let me do this posture and you run away?" As He Tianshu walked through the door, he turned around to look at Zhang Xiaohua in the horse stance. He took a big stride and jumped into the shadow of the wall. He swung his arms with all his strength and sucked in a breath of cold air. He thought to himself, "This brat, where did he get so much strength from? Judging from his strength, it should be more than 500 pounds. AI, careless. I almost made a fool of myself." The ancients said, "Even a boat can capsize in a ditch." Next time, I have to be more careful. What careful? Next time, I definitely won't give him this chance. I have to think a way to beat this brat up. I'll let him stand like this for now and reduce his prestige. I'll let him stand until his waist and legs are sore. He stuck out his head with lingering fear and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Only then did he pull himself together and walk back to his hut. Under the light, looking at the bruise on the lower part of his palm, Tianshu could not help feeling a little stunned. He took some medicinal wine and slowly rubbed it. At the same time, he thought to himself, to be honest, when Miss So told me about this, I didn't care at all. This Zhang Xiaohua was a simple and honest good boy who had not seen the world and was teased by the manservant in the villa. I also saw it in my heart, so I inevitably sympathized with him. But that was human nature. Moreover, in his view, Zhang Xiaohua was a manservant in the villa and had nothing to do with me. I just sympathized with him because I didn't have the good style of meddling in other people's business. Although there was no precedent in Huanqi Villa to teach a manservant martial arts, the master of the villa said that he could just do it casually. Who didn't know the superficial skills? Everyone would have the vanity of being a teacher, so there was nothing wrong with giving some pointers. However, Oyin seemed to have seen through his thoughts, but she didn't say it clearly. She just told him that Zhang Xiaohua had the strength of 250 jin with one arm. Thinking of his disapproving expression at that time, Tianshu couldn't help but feel ashamed of his arrogance. Although hearsay was wrong, it was not desirable for a frog at the bottom of a well to take things for granted. Therefore, after thinking about it, Tianshu temporarily canceled the idea of teaching Zhang Xiaohua martial arts directly. Instead, he let him practice the horse stance first and lay a good foundation for learning martial arts. Presumably, this was the real idea of the master of the villa. Otherwise, he could have found a subordinate to teach him directly. Why did he have to do it himself? Looking at the time, Tianshu was about to get up and take a look at Zhang Xiaohua's pitiful appearance. Thinking back to the first time he performed the horse stance, he still felt a lingering fear. Just as he got up, he changed his mind and sat down again. He rubbed his already fine palm and laughed. Let Zhang Xiaohua perform the horse stance for a while longer. How dare he embarrass himself? If he didn't vent his anger, how could he be his master? However, he didn't think about who asked him to use all his strength. He was careless and only used 50% of his strength. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Tianshu was a little ashamed. Forget it. He should hurry up. It was the child's first time learning martial arts. He shouldn't dispel his enthusiasm after just one time. If Zhang Xiaohua didn't learn, he wouldn't be able to explain it to the master of the villa. When Tianshu walked quickly to the place where Zhang Xiaohua was practicing the horse stance, the situation in front of him surprised him. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't like he imagined, lying on the ground like a pile of mud. He also wasn't standing there pitifully, waiting for him, the savior, to save him. Zhang Xiaohua's horse stance was steady, just like when he had just left. Tianshu couldn't help but feel a burst of joy in his heart. Why was this kid the same as him when he practiced the horse stance for the first time? Even if he was lazy, he didn't do it properly. How could there be a kid who didn't have any aches and pains after practicing for such a long time? No matter what, he had to give him some face and put on a decadent appearance. However, thinking of himself and his master in the past, Tianshu didn't have the intention to point out Zhang Xiaohua's laziness. When Zhang Xiaohua heard that Tianshu had returned, she turned around and asked with concern, "Captain why did you take so long to come back? Is there something wrong with the dishes tonight? Did you eat something bad?" Then she said to herself, "This Huanqi manor is good in every way, but there are too few toilets. Every day, we have to line up to use the toilets. That day, I should have asked Elder Yu to give some reasonable suggestions to the manor lord to improve our living environment and increase our enthusiasm for work." Then, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and said mysteriously to Tianshu, "Oh right, Captain if you encounter this problem next time, you can go to the fields to solve it. Don't line up there like an idiot. I always do this at home. The sky is so dark, no one will see. Moreover, isn't that good for the crops? Doing this is also a contribution to the manor." Bang! Tianshu fell to the ground. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly asked. Captain He, what happened? Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's expression, she really wanted to help He Tianshu up. However, without He Tianshu's instructions, she still remained in the horse stance and didn't dare to get up. He Tianshu jumped up from the ground like a carp and said in a bad mood, "It's nothing, I just stepped on dog poop." Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood and said, "Oh, I see. This dog is too much. Why doesn't it know how to poop in the fields? It would save people the trouble of picking it up. All right, Captain He, your posture just now was so cool. When can you teach me?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "No problem. This is called a carp jumping up. I'll teach you one day." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. "I'm talking about the posture when you fell just now. That's called a carp jumping up? This name is really strange." He Tianshu was also stunned. He Tianshu walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua and carefully looked at her from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, and said to her with a smile, "Xiaohua, your memory is not bad. You were lazy for so long just now, but your posture is exactly the same as mine. Not bad. A genius has fallen from the sky. All right, that's all for today. We'll continue tomorrow morning." After saying that, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua to speak and turned to leave, yawning as he walked. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she quickly got up and said with grievance, "Captain He, I wasn't lazy. I really wasn't." He Tianshu thought to himself, "This kid, even his answer is as cool as mine in the past. He's a promising talent." He didn't turn around and asked, "Are your legs sore? Can you still walk now?" After saying that, she quickened her pace and ran back to her room. As she walked, she thought, the feeling of being a teacher is really satisfying. Back then, did Master smile like this in his heart as he went back to his room? Leaving her blushing, she slowly slipped back to her room. When she thought about how she was exposed for being lazy, she was so shy that she didn't dare to raise her head, afraid that Master would see. When she got back to her room, she let out a sigh of relief. Now that I think about it, Master had already found out, but just didn't punish me. It's also because of this that I worked hard and stood out. And looks like I did the right thing today. Tomorrow morning, Zhang Xiaohua will definitely be like me back then, working hard and no longer being lazy. However, He Tianshu didn't hear Zhang Xiaohua's different answer. "My legs are sore?" "My legs aren't sore, Captain He. I'm not tired at all. Of course I can walk." "Hey, Captain He, don't run. Didn't you say you were going to teach me martial arts? Hurry up and teach me boxing. I'm really not tired. I can still do boxing." Unfortunately, He Tianshu didn't hear it. While Zhang Xiaohua was praising what a cool qigong, he slipped back to his room, leaving Zhang Xiaohua to walk back to his room in confusion. He continued his battle with smelly feet at night. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. Chapter 80. The next morning, the sky was gloomy, but Zhang Xiaohua's mood was bright and sunny. Early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the place where she practiced the horse stance last night. She thought happily in her heart that it was time to teach her boxing today. After waiting for a while, He Tianshu came over. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was already standing there, he was very happy. He nodded and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you're really not bad. You woke up early. That's good. Let's start today." Zhang Xiaohua asked, "What boxing technique are you going to teach me today?" He Tianshu was stunned. "Boxing technique? Hee, don't be in a hurry. First practice the horse stance well. The horse stance is the foundation of boxing. If you don't practice the horse stance well, your lower body won't be stable. As the saying goes, if you want to practice martial arts, first practice the horse stance or practice the horse stance for 3 years. Once your lower body is stable, it'll be easy to learn anything." Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth wide. "What? I have to practice the horse stance for 3 years? What else can I learn? Right, what's the lower body?" He Tianshu smiled and said, 3 years is just a metaphor, but it's also possible that you have to learn the horse stance while practicing boxing. Anyway, if you don't practice the horse stance well, it won't be easy to master boxing. The lower part refers to the area below your waist. Only when your legs are stable can you not be at a disadvantage in a fight. All right, Didn't you see how you punched me yesterday? Although you used a lot of strength, you didn't notice my legs, right? I used the horse stance at the last minute. Didn't you feel that I was standing very steadily yesterday? That's right. If the lower body is floaty and your punch makes me retreat, you'll have the upper hand. If you continue to fight, you'll be suppressing me. If I want to take the upper hand and beat you, it'll be very difficult. Do you understand? Zhang Xiaohua nodded, as if she didn't fully understand. Then she asked weakly, Captain He, what's the upper hand? He Tianshu immediately assumed a horse stance and stood there firmly, saying, That's a good question, but I won't answer it today. You will slowly understand it in the future. All right, let's begin today's lesson. Zhang Xiaohua, continue assuming the horse stance, the same stance I taught you yesterday. Continue. Of course, it's difficult at the beginning, but you must persevere. Don't think about slacking off. At the beginning, you only need to persevere for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Take a rest, then continue. If you can persevere for 1 or 2 months and persevere for a meal, or even better, then I can teach you fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua said in surprise, Captain He, you said that I can hold it for a meal's time? He Tianshu nodded and asked curiously, Yes, what's wrong? Practice. He Tianshu was to practice. Captain He Tianshu's is master. He Tianshu understood and said with a smile, It doesn't matter if it's breakfast or dinner. You have to do it to my satisfaction. Zhang Xiaohua said resentfully, Okay, I got it. I'll do the horse stance for you now. With that, she faced the east, raised her head, and put her hands on her waist. She took the horse stance steadily. He Tianshu smiled as he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's movements. He pointed out a few small mistakes, nodded, and praised. Zhang Xiaohua, not bad. You still remember what I taught you yesterday. Let's see how long you can hold it. If you're tired, let me know and you can rest. Zhang Xiaohua didn't say anything after answering. Her eyes looked at the gloomy sky in the distance, as if she wanted to find the sun there. He Tianshu also walked to the side and began his daily practice. At this time, the other 3 also came out and found a place to practice. He Tianshu was practicing the 1,000 Leaves Palm today. When he first started, he paid attention to Zhang Xiaohua and waited for him to say that he was tired so that he could let him rest first. But as he practiced, he started to focus on his own palm technique and put everything else to the back of his mind. The 1,000 Leaves Palm was very complicated, and it took a lot of effort to practice it from beginning to end. He Tianshu didn't practice it often, so sometimes there would be some inconsistencies. But today, for some reason, from the first move to the last move, it was very smooth. When He Tianshu exhaled and finished, he heard a burst of cheers from the side. He couldn't help but feel a little smug and thought, This group of little brats, they can tell that my 1,000 Leaves Palm has improved. How rare. As he thought, he turned around and said, You guys. Halfway through, he swallowed the rest of his words. Why? There was no one around He Tianshu to watch. The 3 people were cheering at the place where Zhang Xiaohua was in the horse stance. After He Tianshu finished practicing the 1,000 Leaves Palm, he was already far away from where he was standing. Before he reached the place where Zhang Xiaohua was in the horse stance, he heard someone say from afar, Do you dare to bet with me? This Zhang Xiaohua can still stand for 2 meals. If you win, you have to wash my sock for 3 days. Another person said, You're really shameless. How about this? I won't take advantage of you. I bet that Zhang Xiaohua can still stand for 3 meals. If you win, you have to wash my socks for 2 days. The last person said to the other 2 with contempt, You guys can forget about it. Look at the situation. Zhang Xiaohua can stand for an entire morning and still be fine. What's the point of betting? Then the 3 people said in unison, Zhang Xiaohua, you can do it. Zhang Xiaohua, you can do it. He Tianshu walked closer and sternly scolded. What are you guys doing? Why aren't you practicing? When the 3 people saw that He Tianshu had come, they all rushed forward and talked at once about what had happened. It turned out that when the 3 of them came to practice, they had already seen Zhang Xiaohua in the horse stance, but they didn't pay much attention to it. After all, they had all practiced the horse stance before, so they didn't get too engrossed in the practice. The three of them secretly glanced at Zhang Xiaohua as they practiced, wanting to see how he would be unable to hold on and sit on the ground. But as they watched, they realized that something was wrong. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't like them when they first started practicing the horse stance, where the horse stance got lower and lower until he finally sat on the ground. Instead, he was in the same position and didn't move at all. It was as if he had been in the same position for 3 years. The three of them watched and stopped practicing. They looked at each other and gathered around Zhang Xiaohua to ask about Zhang Xiaohua's situation. Zhang Xiaohua continued to practice the horse stance while talking to them. His face wasn't red, his heart wasn't beating fast, and he wasn't even panting. He was actually as relaxed as sitting on a chair. When the three of them heard that Zhang Xiaohua was really practicing the horse stance for the second time, they really didn't know what to say. Since they couldn't say it out loud, they could only shout. The three of them cheered together. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua suspiciously, then looked at the three of them and asked, "Are you sure that Zhang Xiaohua didn't slack off?" The three of them nodded in unison. He Tianshu said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, you were also in the horse stance last night. You didn't slack off, right?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Yes, Captain He. I really didn't lie to you. I didn't slack off." He Tianshu said solemnly, "Yes, I believe you, Xiaohua. By the way, are your legs sore now? Are there any other parts of your body that don't suit you?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "It's fine, Captain He. My legs are a little sore, but there's nothing else on my body that's uncomfortable." He Tianshu thought for a moment and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, if you were to stay in the horse stance the entire time, how long do you think you could stay in it?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Probably until noon. I feel quite relaxed." He Tianshu's expression changed and was about to say something when Zhang Xiaohua saw that He Tianshu's expression had changed. She quickly said, "Captain He, if I persevere a little longer, I can still stay in it for a little longer. It's not impossible for me to persevere until nighttime. This way, you should be able to teach me martial arts." He Tianshu's expression became even more gloomy as he asked sternly, "Zhang Xiaohua, tell me the truth. Have you really never practiced martial arts before? Have you never practiced the horse stance before?" Zhang Xiaohua was still in the horse stance and didn't dare to move. She said anxiously, "It's true, Captain He. Before I met you, I really didn't practice martial arts. This is the first time I've heard you talk about the horse stance." He Tianshu thought for a moment and realized that it was true. When he was teaching yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua's movements were very stiff. She really didn't know how to do the horse stance. Moreover, if she had practiced martial arts before, there was no need to lie to him. Having a foundation was better than having no foundation at all. Suddenly, a thought flashed across He Tianshu's mind like lightning. Could this Zhang Xiaohua be a martial arts genius? However, when he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's ordinary face, childish expression, and slightly thin figure, he couldn't associate her with the word genius at all. For the first time, He Tianshu doubted his own point of view. Aren't all geniuses as handsome as me? Just as He Tianshu was thinking, someone beside him said, "Captain He, it's time to eat. Otherwise, it'll affect the morning's work." He Tianshu nodded and said, "Okay, let's hurry to the dining hall. Work is more important. What's the length of those herbs? Everyone will be affected." After he finished speaking, he led everyone into the small courtyard and rushed to the dining hall. Only Zhang Xiaohua, who was still in a horse stance, was left there crying and shouting, "Captain He, I'm hungry too. What should I do?" He Tianshu, who had already run to the small courtyard, slapped his head and said, "I forgot about Zhang Xiaohua." He quickly turned around and shouted, "Xiaohua, I'll let you pass. Hurry and eat. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it at night." Zhang Xiaohua responded and stood up. She was as nimble as a rabbit, without the slightest pain in her waist and legs. She followed the four people and rushed to the dining hall. In the dining hall, the people in green clothes and hats had already finished eating. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua rush in, everyone had a look of schadenfreude. When Zhang Xiaohua sat down and didn't pick up her chopsticks, Tian Zhongxi came over and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I know you're young and growing. It's inevitable that you're sleepy, but you also have to know your limits. You can't be too late. I won't pursue this matter this time, but if you're so late next time, I'll deduct your wages. Do you understand? Zhang Xiaohua wanted to explain. Tian Zhongxi immediately said earnestly, "Don't say so many reasons. Being lazy is being lazy. Being late is being late. I've heard from Ma Jing. Don't find any excuses. I hope you can correct yourself in the future. If you correct yourself, you'll still be a good servant in Huanxi Manor." Then, he patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and walked away. Zhang Xiaohua looked up at Ma Jing. That guy smiled at Zhang Xiaohua, threw down his chopsticks, and slipped out of the dining hall. Zhang Xiaohua was disgusted. She thought, who did I provoke? I'm just a newcomer. I just want to practice martial arts. Why does this Ma Jing want to bully me? Chapter 81. Zhang Xiaohua naturally understood the thoughts of these people after hanging out with them for a long time. Some of them were born servants at Huanxi Mountain Villa, while some were children from families near Pingyang City. They were sent to the mountain villa to earn money for their families. Life in a mountain villa was leisurely but boring at the same time. After a long time, their hearts would inevitably feel empty. However, the rules in a mountain villa were also strict. These people definitely did not dare to commit big mistakes, but they had secretly done many things like scheming and flirting. Ma Jing probably belonged to the kind of people who felt empty in their hearts. He was usually bullied in front of others. Now that he saw Zhang Xiaohua, who was even more interesting than him, how could he let her go? Naturally, he would think of ways to bully her for fun. However, Zhang Xiaohua's mind was on practicing martial arts. She would not take their petty tricks to heart. She laughed in her heart and muttered to herself, "How can a sparrow or swallow know the ambition of a swan?" Unconsciously, Zhang Xiaohua had already seen through the psychology of this group of people. She had a faint feeling of looking down on them. Zhang Xiaohua naturally did not know that she had changed. In fact, most of the changes in one's body were usually seen clearly by others, but not by oneself. Thinking 3 times a day was the work of a saint. Zhang Xiaohua only knew that she disdained to play these tricks with Ma Jing. This gloomy day, Zhang Xiaohua had a very fulfilling time. She was busy here and there. Her excited mood yesterday had already calmed down. Although it was only a night, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. She did not expect that the martial arts practice that she had been thinking about day and night would start with practicing the horse stance. She had guessed the process, but not the beginning. However, this horse stance was too easy. How could it be called practicing martial arts? Since she had already seen the shadow of practicing martial arts, Zhang Xiaohua naturally threw away the burden in her heart and waited wholeheartedly for He Tianshu's arrangement. In contrast to Zhang Xiaohua's leisurely mood, He Tianshu was in a completely different mood. Yesterday, He Tianshu did not take the matter of Zhang Xiaohua practicing martial arts seriously. He thought that it was just a small wave in life that would subside after a while. However, ever since he saw Zhang Xiaohua practicing the horse stance in the morning, He Tianshu's heart was in turmoil. Although Tian Zhongxi and the other manservants were especially envious of He Tianshu's treatment and looked up to their lives, He Tianshu himself was also full of bitterness and did not know how to vent it. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. Where there were conflicts, there would be scheming. The scheming of the disciples of the Misty School was actually not much different from the scheming of the manservants. This He Tianshu seemed to be the sacrifice of the struggle. It was simple to say. Needless to say, the top figures of the Misty School aside, there were plenty of low-level disciples like He Tianshu in the sect. These people were also divided into numerous private factions according to their own likes and dislikes, personality rejection, and other reasons. To survive in this kind of faction, the most important thing was naturally martial arts. With first-class martial arts, not only did they not need to rely on others, but they could also stretch out their legs and let others hug them. Without martial arts, they could only rely on their own interpersonal relationships. Jianghu people were not nobler than ordinary people. When it came to interpersonal relationships, they were all the same. As long as there was a relationship, It was valuable in Jianghu, in the sect, and in the mortal world. As for He Tianshu, his martial arts were ordinary, and his personality was also ordinary. There was nothing to be proud of, and in terms of interpersonal relationships, he was even worse. He did not know how to flatter others, nor did he know how to curry favor with others. Therefore, in the sect, he only had a few good friends who drank and drank. Usually, he could drink and brag, but other than that, there was nothing good about him. Look, the medicinal field in the Huan Shi Manor needed people to take care of it. Of course, it was He Tianshu, who was not loved by his uncle or grandma. It was said to be an important task in the sect that needed elites to personally take care of it. In fact, it was just farming work. It was just a tall hat for him to wear. This medicinal field had been planted for several months, and he had not seen Zhang Qingyue and the others come to take a look. How could it be considered important? The important elites were all going to fight the Luo Shui gang with real weapons. Thinking about the appearance of others waving their swords, and then looking at the exquisite little medicinal shovel in his hand, He Tianshu felt a burst of tightness in his chest. However, Zhang Xiaohua's appearance seemed to give him a glimmer of hope. What did it mean to be a martial arts genius? Not only did it mean that he could create miracles, but it also meant that his status in the sect would rise. It meant that in the future, he would no longer have to work as a farmer in this small medicinal field. It was common sense that a father's status depended on his son. It was the same for a master to follow his disciple. Now that he thought about it, He Tianshu somewhat regretted letting Zhang Xiaohua call him Captain He. If she had called him master earlier, then this genius disciple would not have been able to escape from the palm of his hand. However, with Zhang Xiaohua's naive appearance, it was likely that he would not have any other intentions. But thinking about Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts, He Tianshu was once again at a loss. Martial arts were naturally divided into internal strength and external strength. As the saying goes, internally, one's breath is cultivated. Externally, one's muscles, bones, and skin are cultivated. No matter what kind of martial arts one practiced, there must be conditions. Let's talk about internal strength first. Naturally, one must have the incantation for internal strength and the method to practice it. Not to mention that He Tianshu's own internal strength was mediocre. The cultivation method was also very common in the Misty School. Even so, these cultivation methods could only be practiced by internal disciples of the Misty School. Privately teaching them to Zhang Xiaohua was absolutely out of the question. Otherwise, before Zhang Xiaohua, this genius, could cultivate her internal strength, the elders of the law enforcement hall would recover Zhang Xiaohua's internal strength. He would also be more miserable than the Huanxi mountain villa. At least here, he could still eat first-class meals. At that time, he estimated that he could only eat plain tea and simple meals. In fact, there was another point, and that was that the mental cultivation method of internal strength was generally practiced from a young age. At that time, the meridians of the whole body were not fully formed. Early practice would help to stabilize the meridians and lay a good foundation for future development. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's meridians had already formed, so it would be difficult for her to practice internal strength. Therefore, for the time being, He Tianshu didn't think too much about internal strength. The only thing left was external strength. When external strength was practiced to a certain extent, it could reach the effect of external strength. It wouldn't necessarily be at a disadvantage when fighting with an internal expert. For example, the external expert Shernyo from the Misty School was younger than He Tianshu, but his achievements were far beyond He Tianshu's. However, there were also conditions to practice external martial arts. When Shernyo was young, he was also tall and big. His muscles were not comparable to ordinary people. This Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to have that kind of capital. And the most important point was that to practice external martial arts, one must have the assistance of medicinal herbs. Think about it. Don't external martial arts practitioners use external forces to stimulate their bodies, to make their bodies strong? After the stimulation, the body not only needed to be nourished with medicinal herbs, but also relied on medicinal herbs to recuperate. This treatment and recuperation could effectively improve one's skills. Otherwise, if you only relied on external forces to stimulate your body, then you could only wait for others to collect your corpse. It was simply impossible to enter Jianghu. Although Shernyo was powerful, he relied on mountains of medicinal herbs. Otherwise, why would there be the saying, the poor study while the rich study martial arts? It also made sense. Thinking of this, He Tianshu also had a headache. Huanchi Villa had piles of medicinal herbs, but they were all from the Misty School. They were not He Tianshu's own. He didn't have any courage to take them. Besides, if a pile of medicinal herbs could work, he could secretly use them. But this was not a pile of medicinal herbs that could work. He couldn't steal medicinal herbs every day. With so many worries and so many worries, could He Tianshu really calm down? Until after dinner, when He Tianshu came to the same place, he still hadn't thought about what to do in the future. However, at this time, he still had time to think about it. He thought that Zhang Xiaohua was not waiting for him there. He Tianshu couldn't help but be a little surprised. What's wrong with this kid? Yesterday, he was still full of interest. Why is he slacking off today? No, he's the guarantee of my good life in the future. I must make good use of him. He turned around and was about to find Zhang Xiaohua when he heard the sound of running. He looked up, and sure enough, it was Zhang Xiaohua. When Zhang Xiaohua ran in front of him, He Tianshu's face became serious, and he asked seriously, Zhang Xiaohua, why are you so late today? Is it because you feel that practicing martial arts is easy? Or do you feel that the horse stance is easy? Zhang Xiaohua saw that He Tianshu was angry and quickly explained, Captain, I didn't mean that. It's just that brother, she told me to have some other things to do, so I was delayed. When He Tianshu heard this, his brows relaxed. He nodded and said, And I know. If you don't have anything to do in the future, come earlier. As the saying goes, an inch of time is an inch of gold. The more time you have to practice martial arts, the more you can improve. Zhang Xiaohua nodded seriously and said, I know, Captain He. He Tianshu continued, Then let's start now. Let's get into the horse stance for a while. With that said, He Tianshu took the lead and got into the horse stance. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate. She spread her legs apart and put her hands on her waist. She squatted down and steadily got into the horse stance. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had gotten into the horse stance, He Tianshu didn't waste any time. He told Zhang Xiaohua about the things to take note of and the benefits of getting into the horse stance. After he finished, He Tianshu asked, You're clear now, right? Do you feel that your lower body is stable? Zhang Xiaohua nodded in agreement. Then, He Tianshu asked again, Does your waist and legs hurt? Zhang Xiaohua said, It doesn't hurt. It's just like normal. He Tianshu nodded to himself. She was indeed a genius. Then he said, Okay, then you can get up. Zhang Xiaohua stood up naturally, as if she wanted to stand up from the chair. He Tianshu looked at her and nodded again. Then, He Tianshu asked, You haven't learned any fist techniques before, right? Zhang Xiaohua said, I haven't learned it before, but I've seen people practice Liu Quan at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. He Tianshu nodded and asked, You still remember, right? Can you show it to me? Zhang Xiaohua said, No problem. With that said, she got into the starting position of Liu Quan and was about to start practicing. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. I've inadvertently become non-mainstream. That's good too. I don't have to do anything to attract attention. Chapter 82. But He Tianshu waited for a long time and did not see Zhang Xiaohua's next dance. He could not help but ask curiously, What's wrong, Zhang Xiaohua? Do you want to continue? Zhang Xiaohua turned her head and said embarrassedly, Captain He, I'm sorry. I forgot. He Tianshu smiled and said, It's okay. This Liu fist is a very complicated fist technique. It's normal that you can't remember it. Just pretend that you didn't see it. Today, I'll teach you a simple Luohan fist. Watch me do it once. With that said, he got into a stance and performed the entire set of Luohan fist once. Then he asked Zhang Xiaohua, Do you understand? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, You were too fast. I couldn't see it clearly. He Tianshu smiled and slowly performed a simple set of Luohan fist once again. Then he said to Zhang Xiaohua, Did you see it clearly? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I saw it clearly. He Tianshu asked, Can you show it to me? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head again and said, I didn't remember it. He Tianshu nodded and said, Then I'll do it again. Follow me and learn. With that said, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to agree, he got into a stance again and started to practice slowly. Zhang Xiaohua, who was beside him, also slowly learned from He Tianshu. She started to practice one move after another. When He Tianshu was done, Zhang Xiaohua had also finished learning. He Tianshu asked again, How is it? Can you remember it? Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes and thought for a while, then said, Captain He, can you let me practice it with you again? He Tianshu said, Okay. Then he slowly practiced it again. It was even slower than before. Zhang Xiaohua followed him and practiced it again. He Tianshu saw that Zhang Xiaohua had finished learning and said, Zhang Xiaohua, practice it again. Let me see. Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes and recalled for a while. Then she got into a stance and practiced the Luohan fist that she had just learned. But halfway through, she could not continue. Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, Captain He, I can't remember it. Please practice it again. He Tianshu frowned a little, but he still controlled himself and practiced it even more slowly. Zhang Xiaohua carefully learned it again, but when she practiced it herself, she only practiced a few more moves than before and forgot it again. She could not help but say to He Tianshu, Captain He, I can't remember it. Can you practice it again? This time, He Tianshu's frown deepened. He did not practice it from the beginning, but continued to teach Zhang Xiaohua the parts that she had forgotten. He guided Zhang Xiaohua to practice from the beginning to the end, making He Tianshu sweat profusely. It was more tiring than sparring with others. Thinking that Zhang Xiaohua had already learned it, He Tianshu let Zhang Xiaohua practice it again from the beginning to the end. But Zhang Xiaohua stopped halfway and scratched her head in embarrassment. Just as she was about to say something, He Tianshu spoke first. Did you forget it again? Let me practice it again. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said yes. He Tianshu sighed and said, This is the last time. Then, starting from the moves that Zhang Xiaohua had forgotten, he taught her the moves one by one. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief and said, You've learned it, right? Zhang Xiaohua nodded vigorously. He Tianshu said, Then let's begin. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua picked up the starting stance of the Arhut fist again and practiced it seriously. Luckily, when she reached the parts that she had forgotten last time, she did not stop, but went through them smoothly. But good things did not last long. After another 2 or 3 moves, Zhang Xiaohua stopped again. She peeked at He Tianshu and wanted to say something, but the poor He Tianshu was driven crazy and spoke first. Did you forget it again? Let me practice it again. Zhang Xiaohua cheerfully nodded. He Tianshu was so angry that he did not know what to say. He pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Xiaohua, are you a genius or are you an idiot? The Arhut fist has a total of 18 forms, and it is the simplest fist technique for beginners. Geniuses can learn it once, and those who are slightly smarter can learn it again. The average person can learn it on the 3rd try. Even for me, my master said that I was as stupid as an ox. I was able to complete the entire set of the Arhut fist on the 4th try. This is the 5th time. How can you still only know 11 forms? Zhang Xiaohua carefully said, Captain He, you've made a mistake. You practiced it 6 times. He Tianshu ignored him and continued to say, When other people learn martial arts, the most difficult part is the horse stance. You don't need to practice it at all, and you're doing it better than me. In the past, I endured this horse stance, so I know how difficult it is. Without great perseverance, it is impossible to be as stable as a rock. But you easily passed this obstacle. It is not an exaggeration to say that you are a genius. But why is it so difficult to practice? All right, I won't say anymore. I'll practice it for the 6th time, the last time. Zhang Xiaohua corrected him again. Captain He, if you practice it again, it will be the 7th time. He Tianshu waved his hand and said, I don't care if you practice it 7 or 8 times. This will be the last time. After saying that, he practiced it at the slowest speed he could, like a snail. He practiced it once. Then he let out a long breath and looked at Zhang Xiaohua with hidden bitterness. Zhang Xiaohua closed his eyes and thought for a long time before getting into his stance. But he still did not bring any good news to He Tianshu. When Zhang Xiaohua practiced to the 13th move, he still stopped and could not continue. Looking at He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua opened his mouth, but in the end, he did not say that sentence. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's aggrieved look and had 1,000 complaints in his heart. He did not know what to say, so he stomped his feet and left in a flash. It was still that old saying, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. This He Tianshu had hoped for his own future from Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts aptitude, he really could not help but blame himself for being blind. In night, He Tianshu waved his hand and did not take Zhang Xiaohua with him. He stood there in a daze, looking at He Tianshu's back as he left. He bit his lips and did not follow him. Instead, he frowned and thought for a long time. Then he got into the horse stance, picked up the Arhut fist starting stance, and started practicing it. But not long after, he stopped again. He had forgotten the later moves, so he tried to recall again and again. But in the end, he stopped again and repeated this several times. If He Tianshu was watching from the side, his nose would definitely be crooked from anger. Zhang Xiaohua practiced to the 13th move for the first time, to the 11th move for the 2nd time, and to the 9th move for the 3rd time. In any case, the more he practiced, the more he forgot. In the end, he practiced the first 6 moves repeatedly, not forgetting them again. Such aptitude. Sigh. Not only was He Tianshu sighing, even Elder Yu, who was standing in the corner, shook his head slightly. Even if he had the strength of 1,000 jin, what was the use? Elder Yu, who came over to peek, sighed in his heart and returned to his room. Only Zhang Xiaohua was left, practicing the 6 moves of the Arhut fist over and over again, afraid that he would forget even one move. Knowing that it was getting late, Zhang Xiaohua could not take it anymore. He tidied up and went back to his room to sleep. The room was still filled with a strange smell. Shaking his head, Zhang Xiaohua opened the window as usual. It was strange. It was already May. It was already very hot and stuffy at night without opening the window, but Ma Jing actually closed the window every day. This made Zhang Xiaohua puzzled. Lying on a Kong bed, Zhang Xiaohua's mind was still filled with moves. He tossed and turned, only the 6 moves of the Arhut fist, and slowly fell asleep. In the middle of the night, the dreamscape flickered. However, Zhang Xiaohua did not seem to feel anything in his dream. His 4 limbs trembled along with the flickering. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua was still the first to go to the training area. He naturally assumed a stance and performed a set of the Arhut fist. No, it was the first 6 moves of the Arhut fist. Zhang Xiaohua was still very satisfied with himself. This time, he did not forget a single move. Not bad. However, when He Tianshu came to the training area, in Captain He's eyes, Zhang Xiaohua was not as satisfied as he looked. Captain He's eyes were red. He probably did not sleep well last night. He must have thought about it for a long time. It seemed that not only would people not sleep well when they were excited, but when they were extremely disappointed, it would also cause insomnia. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua repeating the 6 moves, no, there was a mistake. It was 5.5 moves. He Tianshu's heart itched. He wanted to go up and kick Zhang Xiaohua's butt. When he left last night, Zhang Xiaohua had learned 13 moves. How come he was only left with 5.5 moves? The 5th move should be to turn left, raise your left arm, and clench your right hand into a fist and punch forward from under your armpit. However, when it came to Zhang Xiaohua, he actually pressed his left arm down and clenched his right hand into a fist and punched forward like a cannon. Sigh, it could only be considered half a move. He Tianshu was speechless. Yesterday, he had taught him hand in hand 6 times, not 7 times. He He was only left with 5.5 moves after one night. Moreover, the other 5 moves were also different. They were all different. This talent was too rare. He Tianshu shook his head and was about to walk to the side to cultivate. However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's sneaky glances and his meticulous boxing, He Tianshu's heart softened. Forget it. Anyway, Manor Lord O asked me to teach him boxing. He didn't say that I had to teach him personally. Then he pointed to a disciple who had just come out of the courtyard and said, "You go over and teach Zhang Xiaohua the Arhut Fist." That disciple was startled. He turned his head to look at Zhang Xiaohua's 5.5 moves. He couldn't help but laugh. When he saw He Tianshu's glare, he quickly restrained his smile and ran over. He stopped Zhang Xiaohua and let him follow him and teach him the Arhut Fist from beginning to end. He Tianshu was also practicing and watching at the side. However, he no longer paid attention to that side and focused on his own moves. This was because Zhang Xiaohua's side was purely a copy of what he had taught last night. By the time it was time for breakfast, Zhang Xiaohua had only learned 10 moves. This was under the guidance of that disciple who had patiently taught him repeatedly. Looking at that disciple's sweaty appearance, Zhang Xiaohua felt embarrassed and said, "Thank you. Sorry for the trouble." That disciple smiled bitterly and said, "You're welcome. Just treat it as me reliving the old days." However, he secretly complained in his heart, "If I were to continue teaching Zhang Xiaohua like this for a few more days, then this Arhut Fist would become my best move. In this Misty School, there is probably no other disciple who is more familiar with the Arhut Fist than me." Chapter 83. After a day of hard work, Zhang Xiaohua was already used to it, so he didn't feel tired at all. However, from morning till night, he kept recalling the moves of the Arhut Fist in his mind. It was a very taxing task. Unfortunately, when he practiced again at night, the disciple who taught him in the morning was also speechless. Zhang Xiaohua actually forgot that there were only 6 moves left. He only remembered the first 6 moves. That disciple bitterly reported to He Tianshu. There was no way to teach this disciple. No matter how stupid the others were, they should have already remembered everything that He Tianshu taught them. Why couldn't this Zhang Xiaohua remember it no matter what? He couldn't possibly not practice and teach Zhang Xiaohua the Arhut Fist, right? He Tianshu thought for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "Teach him again tonight. Tomorrow, we'll change to someone else. I don't believe that with the 4 of us, we won't be able to teach him the Arhut Fist." That night, the results were plentiful. After the disciple taught him 7 to 8 times, Zhang Xiaohua actually completed all 16 moves of the Arhut Fist in front of He Tianshu. The Misty School crowd watching from the side all had the same thought: hard work pays off. Even an iron rod can be ground into a needle. The ancients didn't lie to me. When everyone happily returned to their rooms to sleep with the satisfaction of being a teacher, Zhang Xiaohua was still practicing the entire set of the Arhut Fist over and over again. Unfortunately, after who knew how many times, Zhang Xiaohua started to forget the moves one by one. Poor Zhang Xiaohua didn't know what to do. He didn't know whether to continue practicing or not. If he didn't practice, he was afraid that he wouldn't remember, but if he practiced, he was afraid that he would forget. He was in a dilemma. In the end, he could only get into a horse stance. It wasn't until late at night that he slowly walked back to his room. The disappointed Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that a pair of eyes had been watching him in the night. It was the one-armed elder Yu who had come to see him last night. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua's Arhut Fist once again dealt a blow to the strong spirits of the Misty School crowd. The confidence that they had built up last night as a teacher instantly collapsed. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's 5.5 moves that were still full of mistakes and decisively changed to another disciple. That disciple also very generously stepped forward as if he was going to sacrifice himself. The only thing missing was the line of "the wind blows coldly, the water turns cold." Today's practice was the same as yesterday's. He Tianshu was speechless again. A genius that was hard to come by. He should be the Misty School's #1. For the next few days, the Misty School crowd took turns to practice. The result was that everyone's understanding of the Arhut fist had reached a brand new realm that no one had ever reached before. Everyone also took turns to relive the warmth of their first practice. Finally, after seeing Zhang Xiaohua's 5.5 moves that were still the same, he Tianshu waved his hand and swept away the last trace of hope in his heart. His once fiery heart once again returned to normal. I always hoped that a big meat pie would fall from the sky and smash into my mouth. Unfortunately, I guessed the process correctly, but not the ending. The thing that fell was a big iron hammer, and the thing that fell was my head. In the days to come in the Huan Shi Mountain Villa, He Tianshu would repeat this sentence the most. Disappointment was disappointment, and resentment was resentment, but the task given by man or head still had to be completed. Thus, He Tianshu changed his strategy and began to teach Zhang Xiaohua the second set of fist techniques, the Heavens Gathering Fist. The Heavens Gathering Fist was also an extremely simple fist technique, with a set of 20 moves. He would first practice it once, then teach Zhang Xiaohua step by step. Perhaps it was because he already had the foundation of the Arhut fist, but in the end, Zhang Xiaohua learned all 12 moves on his first try, causing He Tianshu's withered heart to feel a little bit of rain. However, on the second day, Zhang Xiaohua's performance was like a tornado that completely blew He Tianshu's heart into a barren land. The Heavens Gathering Fist that Zhang Xiaohua had memorized, apart from the starting moves, was only left with 3 moves that were full of mistakes. Furthermore, these 3 moves were not the 3 moves that were linked together in the set, but were actually 3 moves that were separated by the first 12 moves. He did not know how Zhang Xiaohua managed to link them together, but he actually managed to perform them well. Then, naturally, the other 3 disciples took turns to teach him. A few days later, the result was still the same 3 moves, and the mistakes were not corrected. It was still the same as when he was taught. He Tianshu, no, even the other 3 disciples, completely did not hold on to any trace of hope for Zhang Xiaohua. He Tianshu's strategy changed again. He no longer had the 4 of them teach Zhang Xiaohua the same set of fist techniques, but let the 3 disciples each teach Zhang Xiaohua a different set of fist techniques. He did not teach him anymore. Anyway, it was the same no matter who taught. When it came to Zhang Xiaohua, they would all be wrong and would all be forgotten. He did not need to waste his energy on teaching Zhang Xiaohua's set of fist techniques. When the other 3 disciples first started teaching, they also taught the same set of fist techniques a few times. However, they realized that no matter how many times they taught, whether it was once or 20 times, Zhang Xiaohua would always remember the same few moves the next day. No matter how much they taught, it was useless. Therefore, they changed their teaching strategy. They only taught each fist technique once, and no more. Every day, they would only teach 1 fist technique, and no more. Thus, everyone's life in the Misty School returned to its original point. However, every night, one of the 3 disciples would teach Zhang Xiaohua a new set of fist techniques. No matter if it was simple or complicated, there was only 1 set. Then, the next morning, Zhang Xiaohua would perform the fist techniques that he still remembered. In this strange practice, Zhang Xiaohua learned the incomplete Erlang fist, Wei Tuo fist, Great Sage fist, 8 Immortals fist, Tian Luo fist, Earth Fiend fist, 6 Stars fist, Neza fist, Vajra fist, Guanyin fist, Buddhist fist, Arhut fist, and Vajra hammer. 28 Mansions fist for Immortals fist, 7 Stars visiting a friend fist, Arhut Mantis fist, Yiksha Sea patrolling fist, Vajra Saudi palm, Yiksha iron sand palm, and so on. 1 fist a day was quite fast. Those who were good at learning these fist techniques could remember close to 10 moves, while the worst could only remember 2 or 3 moves. And among these few moves, very few of them could be linked together. Most of them were linked together by Zhang Xiaohua himself. However, it was strange that Zhang Xiaohua linked them together very well. Some of them were as seamless as the antelope's horn. Even He Tianshu was secretly amazed when he saw it. The strangest thing was that Zhang Xiaohua did not remember many of the moves that were completely correct. Most of them were changed by Zhang Xiaohua, and the parts that were changed were firmly remembered by Zhang Xiaohua. No matter how hard he tried to correct them, he would not change them back. Of course, he would not forget them either. After teaching the fist techniques at night, He Tianshu watched as Zhang Xiaohua practiced the incomplete fist techniques that he had learned. He Tianshu shook his head and thought, to be able to learn the fist techniques to this extent, he could be considered a genius. For a long time after that, Zhang Xiaohua would wake up early and work late at night. Every day, he would be the first to arrive at the open space. He would never return to his room until the last moment of the night. His diligence in cultivating made Elder Yu, who had been secretly observing him, nod his head incessantly. He thought to himself, this Zhang Xiaohua's aptitude is really bad. That head of his is like a piece of wood that cannot be carved. However, his perseverance and his ability to endure hardships are not for show. He really is a master that needs to sharpen an iron rod. He really has the potential to be molded. Little did he know that every day when Zhang Xiaohua stepped into the house, he would hold his breath and curse in his heart. When will this Ma Jing start washing his feet? Every morning, when he rushed out of the house, he would shout, "Long live Ma Jing." He could finally breathe fresh air. Sigh, the heavens have eyes. Could it be that behind every successful man, there would be someone silently supporting him? However, could the person behind Zhang Xiaohua be this stinky Ma Jing? Putting aside the fact that Zhang Xiaohua was practicing the basic fist techniques that other Misty School disciples practiced at the age of 4 or 5 in Huanxi Mountain Villa, the Ethereal Mountain Villa, which was adjacent to Huanxi Mountain Villa, was currently filled with joy. In the Ethereal Sex meeting hall, it was bustling with noise and excitement. There was no sign of the usual solemnity. Openg was still sitting at the front, smiling as he looked at the bustling crowd below. Although Openg looked calm, the smile on his face let everyone know that sect leader O was very excited and excited. Thinking about it, since the establishment of the Misty School, there were records of it being passed down for hundreds of years. There was no need to mention anything that wasn't recorded. In the records, the influence of the Misty School seemed to have never crossed the Luo River. At its peak, it only covered the southern Wanjian Peak. It was only because of the incompetence of the later sect leaders that the Misty School declined, that they retreated to the vicinity of Pingyang City. Recently, Openg personally commanded the battle against the Luo River Gang. Although naval warfare wasn't the strength of the Misty School, under the arrangement and deployment of Openg, Shangguan Fenglu, and the others, they were able to miraculously take down the Luo River Gang with only a few casualties. Moreover, Openg personally captured the Luo River Gang's sect leader, Shui Yuping. The Luo River Gang was based on the Luo River and had many members. Although their overall influence was weaker than that of the Misty School, it was only slightly weaker. For the Misty School to be able to take down the Luo River Gang in one fell swoop, the role of the elite team couldn't be ignored. As for being able to take down the upper echelons of the Luo River Gang in one fell swoop, it was all due to the martial arts of the Misty Six Tigers. Now, looking back on the battle at the core of the Luo River Gang, Openg still had lingering fears. He didn't expect Shui Yuping to be a hidden expert. The few hall leaders and elders in the gang weren't weak either. If not for the fortuitous encounter at the Five Fingers Mountain last year, the Misty School would have been defeated by the Luo River Gang. Perhaps they might even have been left behind in Luo River. Openg couldn't help but be vigilant against himself again. In this world, one must act according to one's ability. Any action that exceeded one's ability could only have one result: playing with fire. But at this moment, the most important thing was to celebrate the hard-won victory. Other things could be considered after the celebration. Now, the entire Misty School was in high spirits. If he were to put on the airs of a parent, it would inevitably dampen everyone's spirits. Although Openg had such a dignified aura, he wouldn't do such a pedantic thing. Everyone in the assembly hall had smiles on their faces, regardless of age. At first, they were still concerned about the dignity of the assembly hall. Later, when they saw that the usually serious sect leader was smiling, everyone relaxed. It was rare for them to be able to have fun here. Tomorrow, they would probably have to be solemn, so they might as well smile. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. Chapter 84. Looking at the liveliness in the meeting hall, Peng felt extremely satisfied. Wasn't this man's life to hold up a stable world? He seemed to have done it. Just when Peng was intoxicated with himself, he saw a beautiful figure enter the meeting hall. Peng's eyes lit up and the smile on his face became wider. It was his only sister, Yen. Peng's life experience was miserable since he was a child. His parents died early, so he and his sister depended on each other. After being accepted by the master of the Misty School, his sister naturally followed him to the Misty School. However, she did not follow Peng to become a disciple. Instead, she grew up with Peng's master's wife in Huanxi Mountain Villa. Peng's master had no children. When Peng's master abdicated, the headmaster of the Misty School was determined after careful consideration. Huanxi Mountain Villa was directly handed over to Yin by Peng's master's wife. That was to say, even if Peng was not the headmaster of the Misty School, Huanxi Mountain Villa was still Yan's. Yin could not control Huanxi Mountain Villa because she was Peng's sister. In fact, according to the relationship between Huanxi Mountain Villa and the Misty School, many people thought that it should be managed by Peng's wife. Unfortunately, many things did not seem reasonable. However, in the eyes of the 6 Misty Tigers, this was not the case. Most of them still remembered the little girl who came with Peng a long time ago. They all regarded Yin as their child or sister. They did not care about other people's views and opinions. Huanxi Mountain Villa was their back garden. Of course, they would only be at ease if they handed it over to their own people. Although the headmaster's wife was Peng's wife, she was different from the previous headmaster's wife. She was the founder of Huanxi Mountain Villa. No matter how virtuous and sensible she was still an outsider. How could she be at ease as compared to Yin? Therefore, Yan's status in the Misty School was somewhat aloof. Peng watched his sister walk into the meeting hall with a warm look in his eyes. He was very gratified to see her slowly walking in front of him as if he was looking at his own child. At this moment, Peng was no longer a person. He was the incarnation of a father. It was like seeing his proud and beautiful child appear in front of him. Yin also had the same feeling. The brother in front of her was really not much different from her father. Since she could remember, she had grown up with her brother. He doted on her, loved her, and let her feel the warmth of a father. There were so many words about her father in the book, so she thought of the image of her brother in her heart. It was just that this Jianghu was too cruel. In the past, when Peng was not the gang leader, every time he went out to fight, Yin would be terrified. She prayed silently for fear of losing her only family in this world. After Peng became the gang leader, he was busy with the affairs of the gang and had fewer opportunities to go out in person. Yin knew her brother's hardships and wanted to use her own strength to help him. Therefore, she had been doing her best to take care of the Huanxi Mountain Villa. From logistics, medicinal materials, and other aspects to ease the difficulties of the Misty School, she helped the development of the Misty School. Even last time, because of the treasure, Peng's relatives were asked to be hostages. Yin did not hesitate to go. She was willing to do anything for her brother. It was just that this time, what Peng wanted to do was a bit too shocking. He wanted to annex a gang whose strength was not inferior to their own, and it was in waters that they were not familiar with. Although she knew that her brother had a fortuitous encounter and had taken medicinal pills that increased his skills, Jianghu was not only about martial arts. Opportunity and luck were also very important. Besides, this Jianghu was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. There is always someone better than you. It was possible that the Luo Shui gang was hiding their strength. During the time that Peng was out, Yin really could not sleep at night for fear of hearing bad news. Yesterday, When she received the news that her brother had returned victorious, Oyin wanted to greet Peng as soon as possible. However, Oyin also knew that her brother was the gang leader and no longer belonged to her alone. He was the idol of thousands of gang members, and there were too many things that needed to be done. Therefore, she waited until the celebration party before she arrived late. Oyin walked in front of Peng and said with a salute, "Brother, congratulations on making a great contribution to the foundation of the Misty School." Peng looked at his sister's slightly thin face and said with some heartache, "Yen'er, how many times have I said it? Don't worry about me. With my current skills, if I encounter any danger, escaping is not a problem and I will not lose my life. Look at you. I haven't seen you for only a few days and you've become so thin. Isn't this making me feel bad?" Oyin said with a smile, "It's a pity that younger sister is not a man. Otherwise, you could also go out and fight in your brother's place. What are these worries for now?" Peng looked kindly at his sister. Looking at her face that was so similar to his mother's, he could not help but want to be like before and tug on her little ears. However, this meeting hall was not the main room of the family. He could only wave his hand and say, "The affairs of the gang will naturally be handled by older brother. Yen'er, you don't need to be alarmed. Even if you're a younger brother, I will not let you easily take risks. I will clear the path for you." Oyin nodded with a smile and said, "I already knew this." "Haven't you always been at the forefront since you were young?" Then, Oyin asked again, "Brother, how was your battle with the Luo Shui gang this time?" Peng looked at his sister and pointed to the chair next to him and said, "Yen'er, sit down first. I will tell you slowly." After Oyin sat down, Peng began to tell the story of his departure from the Misty School, all the way until he killed his way into the core of the Luo Shui gang and captured the leader of the Luo Shui gang, Shui Yupeng. During this process, Peng tried to make it as simple as possible and skimmed over the dangerous places. However, when it came to the thrilling parts, Oyin still broke out in a cold sweat. Although her brother was sitting in front of her unscathed, her heart was still hanging high. When Peng finished his understatement, Oyin let out a long breath and said seriously to Peng, "Brother, it seems that it really was very dangerous. If it wasn't for the great improvement in power of older brother and the other brothers, this Luo Shui gang might have been a dragon's pool and a tiger's den." Peng nodded thoughtfully and said, "Actually, if it wasn't for the great improvement in power of us and the other brothers, we wouldn't have had the idea of annexing the Luo Shui gang. This rashly obtained power can cause people to do things that exceed their usual expectations." Oyin agreed and said, "That's right, older brother. The consequences or expectations of this action can often not be controlled by people because they haven't gotten used to this great power and haven't let themselves get used to it. Therefore, they can't have a good understanding of the consequences and can easily bring disaster to themselves." Peng smiled and said, "Yer is right. It's like a farmer who suddenly became rich overnight and has other things on his mind. He wants to do things that he didn't have the courage to do before, such as gambling. Perhaps he hasn't been to a gambling house before, or perhaps he has, but he knows that his wallet is dry and he doesn't dare to place big bets. Now that he feels that he has money and can afford to squander it, he comes to the gambling house and boldly places big bets. Of course, if he can win, the farmer is lucky. But if the gamble is out of the farmer's control, then he may lose his family fortune or even his life. Thinking about it this way, it's because he didn't become rich overnight that he can live a stable life and live an ordinary life until he's old." Oyin looked at her brother with a smile and didn't say anything else. Peng said lovingly, "Yen'er, older brother knows what you're thinking. This time, attacking the Luo Shui gang was indeed a bit risky. This is also because of the sudden increase in power. After the lesson of blood, I have also understood a lot. In the future, me and the other brothers will be more careful. Don't worry, your older brother is not just a farmer who became rich overnight." Oyin smiled like a flower and said softly, "I know, older brother." Peng asked again, "Yen'er, how is the situation in the mountain villa's medicine field?" Oyin frowned and said, The situation is still the same. There hasn't been any progress. After the seeds were planted, there still hasn't been any signs of germination. But I don't know why. Openg was a bit anxious and said, "Could it be that the disciples sent don't know how to plant it? Or is it that the method used is wrong? Why don't we have Hall Masterby, or Elder, he send a disciple that they're proud of to take a look?" Oyen nodded and said, "Perhaps. The method of planting the seeds is based on the usual method of planting medicinal herbs. The disciples in charge of the medicine field were all sent by the medicine hall and have a wealth of experience in planting medicinal herbs. It's just that I don't know why they haven't germinated." Previously, I saw that you were busy with the Luo, Shui gang, and presumably the medicine hall didn't have any spare time. Now, I reckon that Hall Masterby and the others will have some time. Openg nodded and said, "Yinner, you also have to be careful of your body. Don't study too much. If this medicinal herb can be grown, that's the best. If it can't be grown, it's also fine. Older brother doesn't want to see you tire yourself out over such an insignificant medicinal herb." Oyen smiled and said, "I know, older brother. Although I can't practice high-level internal strength, I still know some basic skills. It's more than enough to strengthen my body. You don't have to worry." Openg also smiled and said, "That's right. If you can learn the high-level internal strength of the Misty School, coupled with your mind that likes to study, I will give you the position of the gang leader." I still remember Master's regretful expression when he found out that you couldn't cultivate. It's probably because he felt that it was a pity that you couldn't properly take over the Misty School. Oyen rebuked, "Older brother, look at what you're saying. I'm not interested in the position of the gang leader. Every day, there are so many chores that it's as annoying as the hairs on an ox. It's better to stay in the Huan Shi Mountain Manor. There's nothing troublesome all year round. There's plenty of time to look at the moon and admire the flowers. Occasionally, you can also practice your martial arts. Isn't that wonderful?" Openg also said enviously, "That's right. Looking at how much Master and Mistress love you, it's obvious that they gave you the Huan Shi Mountain Manor. I also want to live a life like yours. It's a pity." Oyen smiled and said, "It's a pity that people in Jianghu have no choice. It's not that bad. Everyone has their own life. Look at older brother. You're like the moon surrounded by stars. You control the power of the gang and work hard for the livelihood of thousands of gang members. Isn't that a life that many people envy?" Chapter 85. Openg smiled proudly and said, "Yinner is right. A real man has an indomitable spirit. Naturally, we have to do something vigorous. Farmers are proud of their crops. Businessmen are proud of their wealth. People of Jianghu are proud of their fame in Jianghu. Since Big Brother has become the leader of the Misty Sect, I naturally have to be proud of the Misty Sect. I have to be proud of the brothers in the sect. I have to be proud of the Misty Sect in my own hands. Maybe when Big Brother is old and can't walk anymore, I will go to your Huan Shi Manor to enjoy my retirement." Oyen nodded happily and said, "The Huan Shi Manor will always be reserved for brother, sister-in-law, and future nephews and nieces. Hee, and grandnephews and grandnephews." At this point, Openg suddenly asked, "Yinner, you don't seem to be young anymore. Do you want brother to give you advice on your marriage?" Oyen blushed and said, "Brother, you should worry about the affairs of the sect first. If there is a suitable one, I will definitely tell brother. I won't talk to you anymore. I'm going to talk to Sister Qin." Then, she stood up and walked to a row of hall masters to talk to a middle-aged woman. Openg watched his sister run away and couldn't help but laugh in his heart, thinking, "It seems that Yinner has reached the age. I have to take care of things for her." However, there are many young men in Jianghu who meet the requirements. I have to slowly choose one. Sister Qin, who was talking to Oyen, was the hall master of the Misty School's Ming Shui Hall. As the saying goes, men and women of Jianghu are affectionate. If there are men in Jianghu, there must be women. The Misty School was no exception. In addition to most of the male disciples, they also recruited some talented girls to be trained as female disciples. These female disciples, except for a few who follow their masters to cultivate, such as Shui Qing, were all in Ming Shui Hall. Generally, the female heroes who had some fame in Jianghu were mostly talented. This talent was reflected in their appearance. Generally, female heroes had beautiful faces that people would never get tired of looking at. Big Sister Qin, on the other hand, was an anomaly. Her appearance was extremely ordinary and could even be said to be passable. Moreover, her skin was coarse and dark. At a glance, she was no different from a peasant woman in the countryside. In fact, she could not even compare to a peasant woman. Why? You said that the people of Jianghu all practiced martial arts. Of course, they practiced martial arts to protect their lives. Of course, it was also to strengthen their bodies. Needless to say, if you didn't even have a slim body, you would be embarrassed to say that you were in Jianghu. However, Big Sister Qin was not like that. She had a waist like a water bucket. Coupled with that face, she was naturally inferior to a peasant woman. The most infuriating thing was that Big Sister Qin's specialty was the snake fist. However, no one knew whether she practiced it for the sake of practicing martial arts or for other purposes. However, most people did not have the fortune to see it. Those who were able to see Big Sister Qin's snake fist were either beaten to death by her on the spot or fainted from anger. When they returned home, they vomited and died. However, Big Sister Qin also had a good point, and that was that she had a good voice. When she spoke, it was as clear and melodious as an oriole. No one would get tired of hearing it 100 times. When she sang, it caused a sensation in Jianghu. No one knew how many Jianghu elites followed her voice. After listening to her singing, they used their peerless qing gong to escape. When I close my eyes, I want to commit a crime. When I close my eyes, I want to retreat. When I open my eyes, I want to defend myself. This was written by a famous scholar in Jianghu for Big Sister Qin. However, Big Sister Qin also contributed to Jianghu. For a long time, the number of rapists in Jianghu had greatly decreased. Many rapists had washed their hands and no longer dared to believe their own ears. Moreover, the first choice of martial arts for the generation of Jianghu elites was Qinggong. Big Sister Qin's contribution to the promotion of Qinggong in Jianghu could not go unnoticed. As a result, there were a few sects in Jianghu that specialized in Qinggong that wanted to find Big Sister Qin and give her a banner. However, before these sects could make a move, an accident happened. Big Sister Qin's destined son appeared. That day, just as Big Sister Qin was singing in the bath, our big brother Qin followed the sound and came over. He was intoxicated by the sounds of nature. When the singing stopped, he realized the awkwardness of the situation. If Big Brother Qin listened, then he listened. If he saw, then he saw. If he saw, then he should quickly run away. However, Big Brother Qin had despised Qinggong ever since he was young. He thought that it was an inferior martial art. Usually, he would not show any disadvantage in Qinggong. However, at this critical moment, he could see the difference. The other people who had been hiding and eavesdropping also walked away. In the blink of an eye, they had disappeared. Poor Big Brother Qin was easily caught up by Big Sister Qin after she put on her clothes. From then on, he fell into Big Sister Qin's evil clutches and was forced to get married. For a long time after he got married, Big Brother Qin would pull people's hands whenever he saw them and say, "I'm really stupid, really." Then he lifted his waist that he almost could not straighten up and said, "I only know that practicing Qinggong is for escaping. It's not what a real man should do. I also know that rapists have good Qinggong because they have ulterior motives. That's why I disdain to practice Qinggong. However, I did not know that Qinggong is also used to save lives." If you can't practice Qinggong well, how can you survive in Jianghu? I really regret it. If God gives me another chance, I will definitely tell Master that I was wrong. If God can add a few more words to this mistake, I will definitely say that I will never dare to eavesdrop on other people's singing again. He then picked up the deer blood and tiger bone soup that he always carried with him and drank it all in one gulp. Then he cried bitterly. After Big Sister Qin got married, she no longer stepped into Jianghu. She and Big Brother Qin were inseparable. This caused those sects who wanted to give her a banner to fail. It was also an accident that Big Sister Cheen joined the Misty School. Big Sister Cheen and her husband met an enemy in the wilderness. Both of them were seriously injured. At the moment of life and death, they were saved by the 6 Misty Tigers who were passing by. They were brought to the Misty Mountain Villa for rescue. Unfortunately, Big Brother Cheen's injuries were too serious. He passed away after a few days in the Misty Mountain Villa. Big Sister Cheen was lucky enough to escape death. So, she joined the Misty School and took charge of the Mingsue Hall. The Mingsue Hall was named after the words 2 orioles singing in the green willows, a group of egrets flying in the blue sky. When Big Sister Cheen went to the Misty School, there were naturally many followers of her singing in the sect. These people also sympathized with Big Brother Cheen's experience. There were also many people who had been held by Big Brother Cheen. However, Big Brother Cheen and Big Sister Cheen's final battle of life and death shocked them. Even now, it was still remembered by many people. They only remembered that day when Big Brother Cheen was dying. Big Sister Cheen held his hand and said, "Big brother, that day you were forced to marry me. I know that I have wronged you. You have suffered by being with me. I have let you down." Big Brother Cheen shook his head weakly. He used the last of his strength to hold Big Sister Cheen's hand and said, "No, you are wrong. Meeting you is my greatest happiness." The ancients said that after the lights go out, all women are the same. Actually, they are all wrong. After the lights go out, you are the best in the world. With a wife like this, what more can a husband ask for? Can you sing one last song for me? Big Sister Cheen dragged her extremely weak body and opened her cracked and bloody lips to sing. A plum blossom stands proudly in the snow. Under Big Sister Cheen's lingering singing, Big Brother Cheen closed his eyes. Big Sister Cheen's face was covered in tears. However, to everyone's surprise, after the song ended, Big Brother Cheen forced his eyes open and said, "Also, the deer blood tiger penis soup you made is also very good." Big Sister Cheen understood and forced a smile and said, "Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too." Then, Big Brother Cheen let go of her hand and went straight to the west. Big Sister Cheen also fainted in pain. She only woke up one day and one night later. Then, she dragged her injured body and held Big Brother Cheen's funeral. She also cut off her will to never marry again and never sing again. When this matter spread to the martial arts world, everyone sighed and said, "Endless love, a plum blossom is the best." Because of this, Big Sister Cheen won the respect of everyone in the Misty School. Oyen was naturally no exception. She liked this female hall Master Mingsue very much and would chat with her whenever she had nothing to do. Moreover, Big Sister Cheen's voice was so pleasant to the ears. However, we didn't talk much with Big Sister Cheen today before she saw Zhang Qingyu walk to Openg and whisper a few words. Openg nodded and stood up. He called Big Brother Hu and Big Brother Li of the 6 Misty Tigers, and the 3 of them left the meeting hall. After the 3 of them came out, they walked along the corridor to the back of the meeting hall. They passed through a row of spacious rooms and entered a door. The door was also a spacious courtyard. Opposite the courtyard was a lobby. There was a plaque in front of the lobby that said Law Enforcement Hall. It was the Misty School's Law Enforcement Hall. At this time, a powerful and solemn-looking old man was standing in front of the lobby. It was the Law Enforcement Hall Master Lu Yuzhou. Lu Yuzhou saw Openg and the others coming and went forward to salute. "Greetings, gang leader." Openg quickly returned the salute and said, "Old Hall Master Lu, there's no need to be so polite. Has Shui Yupeng been escorted to the hall?" Hall Master Lu cautiously said, "Yes, gang leader." This time the escort was very careful, so it was a bit slow. Some of Shui Yupeng's family also accompanied her. They followed gang leader's instructions and took good care of her. There were no casualties. Openg nodded in satisfaction and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Old Hall Master Lu. I can only rest assured if I leave this matter to you." Hall Master Lu smiled and said, "Gang leader's words are too serious. This is what this old man should do." Openg smiled and said, "Old Hall Master Lu, there's no need to be so polite. You've been the Law Enforcement Hall Master for longer than I have been the gang leader. This cautiousness is all thanks to the Misty School. All right, let's go in and see what this gang leader of the Luo Shui gang can do. After saying this, he entered the law enforcement hall's door. The others followed behind Openg. The law enforcement hall's hall was very large. There weren't many chairs, and there weren't many windows in the hall. They were all closed, and no sunlight came in. It was very cold and gloomy. At this time, most of the disciples in the hall had gone to the assembly hall and the square. The ones left were the elite disciples. These people were all holding swords and sabers in their hands. They were ready for battle and didn't dare to slack off. This was because at this time, the gang leader of the Luo Shui gang, Shui Yuping, was sitting in the hall. Chapter 86. In the law enforcement hall, a white-robed man stood beside a pillar with his hands behind his back. He was staring at the decorative patterns on the pillar. His white robes were slightly wrinkled and stained with blood. However, these, along with his sharp eyebrows and straight nose, only made him look imposing and not dispirited at all. Openg walked into the disciplinary hall and looked up to see this man dressed in white. That person also heard the sound and turned around. Their gazes met in an instant. Openg stopped in his tracks, and the man in white froze. The two looked at each other for a moment, their eyes narrowing at the same time. Only then did they withdraw their gazes. The man in white went back to looking at the boring decorative patterns. Openg once again stepped into the disciplinary hall and walked towards the chair placed in the center of the hall. Openg sat on the chair and silently looked at the tall man in white in front of him. He didn't speak and seemed to be thinking about something. The man in white also didn't look at Openg. At this time, the air also froze. The 6 Misty Tigers also walked into the disciplinary hall. Only Hu Yuni sat below Openg. Everyone else stood, including Lu Yuzhou. After waiting for a while, some people became impatient. Lu Qingyang, old Fifth Lu, frowned and said, "You bastard, you've already been captured by my Misty School. Why are you still putting on airs? Do you want me, old Fifth Lu, to give you a beating?" Openg was a little angry. He glared at old Fifth Lu and lightly scolded, "Fifth brother, don't talk too much." Old Fifth Lu was unconvinced and said, "Third brother, this bastard," before he could finish. The man in white said, "Since I've been captured, my life and death are in your hands. Why talk too much?" Openg smiled and said, "Brother Shui, you don't need to lower yourself to his level. My fifth brother is a boor. You don't need to take those words to heart." The man in white, Shui Yuping, snorted and didn't say anything else. At this time, old Fourth Shangwan said, "Gang leader Shui, do you still think this is your Luo Shui gang? Since you know you've been captured by us and are now a prisoner of my Misty School, you should have the awareness of being a prisoner. You shouldn't act so righteous, as if it's a blessing that we captured you and insulted your martial arts for no reason." Shui Yuping glanced at Shangwan Laosi without saying anything. Shangwan Laosi continued, "I know what clan leader Shui is thinking. Is it because my Misty School sudden attack caught the Luo Shui clan off guard and caused them to suffer a great loss? If the Luo Shui gang had been even the slightest bit vigilant, we would have been the ones completely wiped out." Shui Yuping snorted again and said loudly, "It's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning." Shangwan Laosi snorted and said sternly, "What dirty tricks? What dirty tricks? What schemes? What schemes? What schemes? As long as you can win, it's a good scheme. Jianghu, Jianghu, Jianghu. We don't need a reason. We don't need to be honorable. Clan leader Shui seems to have been a clan leader for so long that you've forgotten the law of the jungle." Shui Yuping said, "There's no need for Master Shangwan to worry about this. I naturally know." Shangwan Laosi said, "Since you know this principle, then you should know that there will be a time when a gang tries to annex another gang. Naturally, there will be a day when you will be annexed by another gang. Clan leader Shui can't have forgotten how the Luo Shui gang grew, right?" At this time, Shui Yuping's expression was somewhat uncertain. The faith in her heart was slightly shaken. Seeing this, Hu Laoda opened his mouth and said, "Is clan leader Shui still regretting your plan to attack the Xian Rong gang? Because of our interference, you failed on the verge of success?" Shui Yuping's expression became even more gloomy. "That's right. My Luo Shui gang has always relied on Luo Shui for a living. We have no foundation on land. For the sake of Luo Shui's development, I did my best to plan for several years to bring the Xian Rong gang under my command. But I didn't expect you to take advantage of my weakness. If not for the fact that my gang's attention was focused on Xian Rong gang, how could you have succeeded so easily?" Shangguan Laosi laughed. "The ancients say that those who scheme against others will always be the ones to scheme against. Clan leader Shui must have learned this before. Besides, the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. This is not uncommon in Jianghu. To be ambushed by my Misty Mist gang, it can only be said that clan leader Shui was too careless. If you can plan to go ashore, how can the gangs on land not plan to enter the water?" Shui Yuping looked up to the sky and sighed. "Man proposes, God disposes. What can I say if God disposes of me?" At this time, Openg also smiled and said, "Clan leader Shui, you're wrong. It's not that God is heartless. This time, God has opened his eyes." Shui Yuping was stunned and asked curiously, "Why does clan leader O say that? Could it be that your Misty School's annexation of my Luo Shui gang is actually doing me a great favor?" After he finished speaking, he laughed coldly. Openg saw this and didn't argue with him. Instead, he asked, "Then does clan leader Shui know the background of the Xian Rong gang's leader, Zhao Xian?" Shui Yuping heard this name and said contemptuously, "Isn't he just a mountain bandit who has the support of a wealthy merchant in Yu City and is only able to survive in the cracks between the various sects? What kind of background could he have? Then what about Zheng Rong?" Openg continued to ask. "Zheng Rong?" Shui Yuping was puzzled. "Isn't he the second in command of the Xian Rong gang? Isn't he a scholar that Zhao Xian robbed when he was in the mountains?" It said that the two of them got to know each other through fighting. In the end, they became sworn brothers, and Zheng Rong followed suit. Openg smiled and said, "Clan leader Shui is right." Later on, Zheng Rong felt that robbing in the mountains was not the way to survive. So he acted as a middleman and led Zhao Xian to become acquainted with a wealthy merchant in Yu City. Then he came down from the mountains and established the Xian Rong gang between Yu City and Pingyang City. Shui Yuping listened and nodded involuntarily. Then Openg asked, "Then why does clan leader Shui think that the wealthy merchant wants to cooperate with a mountain bandit with no background?" Shui Yuping thought for a moment and said, "According to our understanding, the wealthy merchant wants to expand his influence and find a chance to make a name for himself. He doesn't want to limit himself to business." Openg asked again, "Then why doesn't the wealthy merchant seek help from the large sects in Yu City or the Misty School in Pingyang City?" Shui Yuping said, "Maybe he thinks that Zhao Xian is easier to control. If he cooperates with the large sects, he will be eaten up by you." Openg smiled and said, "That makes sense. Clan leader Shui, why do you think we haven't taken over the Xian Rong gang since it's so close to the Misty School? Why do you think we're taking over the Luo Shui clan instead?" Shui Yuping smiled and said, "How would I know? Maybe he thinks that the Xian Rong gang is just a fly with too little meat." However, Openg said, "Clan leader Shui is wrong. The Xian Rong gang is located between Pingyang City and Yu City. If the Misty School can take over the Xian Rong gang, its influence will immediately expand to the vicinity of Yu City. The benefits to the Misty School will not be small." Shui Yuping was also curious and asked, "Then why hasn't clan leader O acted yet?" Openg smiled mysteriously and said, "That's because of Zheng Rong." "Zheng Rong?" Shui Yuping was stunned. Openg continued, "Zheng Rong is an abandoned disciple of the Dalan Temple's law enforcement elder, Changgong." Hearing this, Shui Yuping sucked in a breath of cold air. He was also a guild leader, so he didn't lack strategic insight. What he lacked was information, and this lack of information directly led to his and Peng's different judgments of the Exine faction. No one was a fool. Shui Yuping immediately understood what Peng meant. He was about to touch the tigers, but the word abandoned made many connections. First of all, as the saying goes, you have to look at the owner before beating the dog. Although Zheng Rong was an abandoned disciple, he was still a member of the Dalan Temple. Although he was abandoned, it did not mean that the Dalan Temple would not care. If you taught him a lesson, wouldn't you be disrespecting the Dalan Temple? Moreover, even if the Dalan Temple did not care, they could not stop the law enforcement elder from expressing his warmth from a personal perspective. How could the Luo Shui gang provoke the Dalan Temple's law enforcement elder? Not to mention the connections in Jianghu. Just Chonggung's disciple alone was enough to destroy the Luo Shui gang. Secondly, if there was an abandoned, there would definitely be a return. Who knew when the Dalan Temple's abbot would impulsively accept this abandoned disciple back into the sect? No one could ignore this possibility. Moreover, this abandoned disciple of the Dalan Temple had not been announced to Jianghu. Even Peng only knew about this through extremely secretive channels. If one day the Dalan Temple announced that this abandoned disciple was just a slip of the pen and ink and could not be counted, then wouldn't anyone who acted against the Exine Rong gang become an enemy of the Dalan Temple? Alas, the Dalan Temple used the word abandoned very cleverly. When Shui Yuping thought of this, he was somewhat disheartened and his expression could not help but become bleak. However, he still sneered and said, "Even if my Luo Shui gang could not take down the Exine Rong gang and was eaten up by them, or fell into the hands of the Dalan Temple, it would only be the end of the gang. What's the difference between this and today's situation? Grand Faction Leader O, this is just the pot calling the kettle black. Since you are the victor, you naturally have a right to laugh." Peng smiled and did not refute him. Instead, he looked at Li Jian. Li Jian nodded and walked out. He came to Shui Yuping, and without saying anything, he pulled out the sword at his waist and waved it. Shui Yuping thought that his time was up and closed his eyes like a hero, ready to sacrifice himself. However, after waiting for a long time, he did not feel any pain. Then, he opened his eyes and looked at Peng. Peng looked at him with a smile. Just like before, he did not say a word. Shui Yuping looked at Li Jian in confusion. However, he was immediately stunned by the scene in front of him. This is the sword ray. Shui Yuping's face was ashen as he looked at the sword ray in Li Jian's hand. He cried out in surprise, "Is there really such swordsmanship in this world?" After a while, Shui Yuping let out a long breath and said, "Master Li's martial arts have advanced to such a level. I have nothing to say about my defeat." Then, he said to Peng, "I originally thought that I was unlucky to be ambushed by Grand Faction Leader and fell into your trap. I felt indignant. When Grand Faction Leader exchanged blows with me, I was absent-minded and thought that Grand Faction Leader was only SOSO. Now that I think about it, Grand Faction Leader seems to have hidden his true strength. Please add it to your collection. Thank you." Chapter 87. Peng said, "Sect leader Shui must be joking. Swords have no eyes, who would hold back in a life and death battle. This one will naturally give it his all. My second brother's martial arts are naturally higher than mine. This one has always been busy with the sect's affairs and has fallen behind in terms of martial arts. The path of martial arts is like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't advance, you'll fall behind. I'm sure Brother Shui understands this." Finished speaking, he waved his hand at Li Jian. Li Jian understood and withdrew his sword, returning to his original position. Shui Yuping snorted and didn't reply, thinking, only a ghost would believe that. However, at this time, Shui Yuping's face was no longer as arrogant as before. Thinking about it, although the Misty School took advantage of the Luo Shui gang by catching them off guard and wiping them out in one fell swoop, they did have the strength to do so. Just by looking at Li Jian's martial arts, the Luo Shui gang was invincible. If they were to fight face to face, the Luo Shui gang wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being wiped out. At this time, Shui Yupeng was out of luck. Openg looked at Shui Yupeng's face and said with a smile, "Sect leader Shui, this one has a gift for you. I hope you'll accept it." Finished speaking, he nodded at Shangguan Fenglu, who immediately hurried out of the Hall of Justice. Shui Yupeng looked at Openg strangely, a trace of uneasiness in his heart. Sure enough, not long after, Shangguan Fenglu slowly walked into the Hall of Justice. Behind him was a woman in plain green clothes, holding a 3-year-old child in her arms. The woman's face was pale, and her expression was somewhat agitated. The little boy's eyes were darting around as he held a Tong Hulu in his hand, eating it with relish. The two followed Shangguan Fenglu into the Hall of Justice. Shui Yupeng saw the two familiar figures and immediately couldn't help but tremble. He looked back at Openg with an angry expression and said sternly, "Openg." Without waiting for Shui Yupeng to finish, Openg laughed and cut him off, asking, "Sect leader Shui, what did I do?" Shui Yupeng lowered his voice, saying, "Jianghu people have their own rules. My martial arts are not as good as yours. I can give my life to you. My wife and child don't know martial arts. Why did you take them?" In the end, there was a hint of pleading in his voice. Openg was still all smiles as he waved his hand and said, "Brother Shui, you're exaggerating. I'm not as bad as you think." While the two were talking, the woman and the child had already entered the law enforcement hall. The boy stared curiously at the group of strangers around him. When he saw a familiar face, he cheered and no longer focused on the candied hawthorn in his hand. He struggled to get out of the woman's arms. The woman hugged him and didn't dare to let go. She looked at Shui Yupeng pitifully. The child's face was also red and his small body was twisting hard. He was about to cry. His hand, that was not holding anything, also reached out to Shui Yupeng. In an instant, Shui Yupeng's mind was emptied of all thoughts. What Jianghu? What bloodshed? What imperial dynasty? What Jianghu? What Jianghu? What bloodshed? What imperial dynasty? What Jianghu? What Jianghu? What bloodshed? What imperial dynasty? What Jianghu? What Jianghu? What Jianghu? At this moment, Shui Yupeng no longer had his arrogance. He bent his back that had always been straight and reached out with his hands behind his back. He made a gesture of hugging the child. When the woman saw this, she let go of her hands and carefully put the boy on the ground. As soon as the boy's feet touched the ground, he immediately whistled and rushed over with a giggle. Shui Yupeng waited for the boy to come closer. He grabbed the child's armpits and raised him high above his head. His two hands alternated in front and back, causing the child's body to sway left and right, making the child giggle. He seemed to like this game that he often played. When the child was done laughing, Shui Yupeng held the child in his arms. He raised his head, squinted his eyes, and lovingly stroked his little head. He was enjoying this rare family happiness that he thought he would never have again. The boy seemed to be uncomfortable because his father hugged him harder than before. He struggled with all his strength and poked his little face out of Shui Yupeng's arms. He pushed the candied hawthorn in his hand to Shui Yupeng's mouth and said in a childish voice, "Daddy, this is for you. It's so sweet." Shui Yupeng gently said, "Good boy, Tian Tian. Daddy won't eat it. You can eat it yourself." The boy was unhappy. He twisted his body and said coquettishly, "Daddy, you must eat it. Tian Tian has always wanted to give Daddy some. If Daddy doesn't eat it, Tian Tian will finish it all. When that time comes, Tian Tian will be unhappy." Usually, Shui Yupeng would not eat the candied hawthorn. He would definitely think of a way to make the child eat it himself. At this moment, he suddenly felt his eyes moisten. He looked at the child's eager eyes and opened his mouth. The boy saw that his father had finally agreed and was very happy. He put the candied hawthorn into his father's mouth. When he saw Shui Yupeng take a bite, he smiled sweetly. He also carefully bit the candied hawthorn that was about the same size as his mouth and ate happily. As he ate, he muttered, "Big Sister Shui was right. She didn't lie to Tian Tian. I can really see Daddy here." Shui Yuping was startled and asked, "Who is Big Sister Shui?" As Tian Tian ate, he looked up and said, "It's that pretty big sister with that thing on her face." Big Sister Shui picked up Tian Tian and Mother and said that she was looking for Daddy. She even gave Tian Tian this delicious thing. "I haven't seen Daddy for a few days." Tian Tian thought that Big Sister was lying. Shui Yuping immediately understood the reason. Then, he carried Tintin over to the woman and said, "Good boy, Tintin. Come and play with Mother. Daddy still has things to do. I'll play with you later." Hearing this, Tian Tian stretched out his arms and hugged Shui Yuping's neck. He frowned and said unhappily, "Then Daddy should come quickly. Don't be like before and always go back on your words." Shui Yuping smiled and kissed Tian Tian's little face, saying, "This time Daddy will definitely keep his word." Tian Tian cheered and kissed Shui Yuping's face, saying, "Then Tian Tian will wait for Daddy outside." Then he obediently let go of his arms and twisted his body to hug his mother. The woman hurriedly and carefully took Tian Tian into her arms. At this time, the woman's expression had returned to normal. Shui Yuping looked at her and nodded deeply. Her eyes revealed a look of pleasant surprise. She did not say anything to Shui Yuping and turned to leave the law enforcement hall. Tian Tian, who was in her arms, looked at Shui Yuping with reluctance. When the two figures disappeared, Shui Yuping turned around and said to O Peng, clan leader. Oh, Peng understood and said, "Clan leader Shui, don't worry. Your family of 14 is unharmed." Then O Peng said to the people below, "Bring a chair for clan leader Shui." The people below placed the chair beside Shui Yuping. O Peng said, "Clan leader Shui, please sit down and talk." Shui Yuping looked at the chair and thought for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. She then calmly sat down. Seeing this, O Peng smiled in satisfaction. He then said, "Since Brother Shui has sat down, then please listen to what this one has to say." From Brother Shui's point of view, the Luo Shui gang being taken down by my Misty School is the same as being taken down by the Dawn Temple. They are both the result of the gang being destroyed. Actually, Brother Shui, if you think about it carefully, you will find that there is a fundamental difference between the two. If the Luo Shui gang is taken down by the Dawn Temple or the Exenrong sect, then it must be because Brother Shui's attack on the Exenrong sect has failed, or the Dawn Temple has come to take revenge on Brother Shui for destroying the Exenrong sect. However, looking at the strength of the Exenrong sect and the Luo Shui gang, it should be the latter. At that time, the Dawn Temple will take revenge and will not hold back. Not to mention Brother Shui's family. The brothers in the gang will also suffer heavy casualties. Moreover, the Dawn Temple has the power to control the waterways and will not leave the Luo Shui gang behind. Brother Shui's Luo Shui gang will definitely be destroyed. There is no other choice. Shui Yuping smiled bitterly and said, "I have overestimated myself. If it was really an egg striking a rock, this would probably be the result." O Peng continued, "But now the situation has changed. Brother Shui has not even begun to attack the Exenrong sect before it was taken down by my Misty School. Brother Shui's Luo Shui gang has yet to form a grudge with the Dawn Temple." Shui Yuping sneered. "Then wasn't the Luo Shui gang taken down by you guys? Didn't it also end up being destroyed? It's just that the casualties in the gang were not heavy. Don't tell me you want me to continue running the Luo Shui gang?" Speaking up to this point, she could not help but be startled. She raised her head and looked at O Peng. "Don't tell me gang leader O really has such intentions?" She seemed to be surprised. Actually, since the Misty School attacked the Luo Shui gang, she arranged for her family to escape. Then, she led the elders and hall masters to fight against the Misty School. As a result, the entire gang was wiped out and captured. Shui Yuping was already disheartened. She thought that there was no way she could escape the destruction of the Luo Shui gang. From then on, the Luo Shui gang's name would no longer exist in the Jianghu. She would also be killed. The reason they took her to the Misty School was nothing more than to encourage the morale of the gang. Killing the gang leader in front of everyone would have a much better effect than if no one saw it. Therefore, Shui Yuping had always maintained her integrity. She wanted to leave a good reputation before she left this world. Actually, it was not that Shui Yuping did not consider the possibility of the Misty School sparing her life and relying on herself to develop the Luo Shui gang for the Misty School. However, thinking about it, although the Misty School did not have any influence on the Luo Shui gang, the Luo Shui gang had so many elders and hall masters. Any one of them might not have the prestige she had in the gang, but there was never a shortage of capable people who could manage the affairs of the gang. With the help of the Misty School's martial strength, even without her, Shui Yuping, the Luo Shui gang could still develop. Leaving her behind would definitely be a hidden danger to the Luo Shui gang. Therefore, Shui Yuping had always thought that the Misty School would not spare her. However, until now, Peng had first compared the strength of the two factions, then brought out the background of the Shinrong faction, and even brought out the martial strength of the Misty School. Finally, he had her family appear. Could it be that Shui Yuping's heart was stirred up again? She really could not believe that Peng had such great courage and was willing to spare her so that she could regain control of the Luo Shui gang. Please add it to your collection. Thank you. Chapter 88. When Peng heard Shui Yuping's words, he smiled proudly and said, "Why not?" With such a big step in front of him, how could Shui Yuping not take it? He immediately knelt down and said, "Shui Yuping greets Chief O." Peng waited for him to kneel down before he stood up and helped Shui Yuping up. He said loudly, "Brother Shui is too polite. Since you've entered the Misty School, you're my brother. Please rise." When the rest of the people saw this, they all laughed and went up to congratulate him. Thus, Shui Yuping once again greeted everyone one by one. After everyone returned the greeting, Peng asked the gang members to bring a few chairs over for everyone to sit down. Peng smiled and said to Shui Yuping, "Brother Shui, are you curious as to why I let you take over Luo Shui and not let someone else replace you?" Shui Yuping cupped his hands and said, "Since Chief has made such an arrangement, there must be a reason for it. This subordinate will definitely listen to Chief's arrangements. However, this subordinate is indeed curious. From the elders to the hall masters, there are many people who can replace this subordinate. For Chief to use this subordinate is out of this subordinate's expectations. This subordinate is all ears. Please help me clear up my doubts." When Peng heard Shui Yuping call him subordinate, he smiled and said, "Brother Shui, you don't have to call me subordinate. My Misty School doesn't have that many rules, and I don't see Brother Shui as a subordinate. If you're willing, Brother Shui can call me brother." Shui Yuping readily accepted and said with a smile, "Since Chief has said so, how can this brother not obey?" Peng continued, "Although the battle between the Luo Shui gang and Misty School was intense, the disciples of Misty School were all elites and knew how to hold back. Although the Luo Shui gang was taken down, they didn't suffer heavy casualties. It could even be said that they didn't hurt their bones, but their morale was broken. What the Misty School needs to do now is to regain the morale of Luo Shui so that they can deal with the prying eyes of the other gangs. If it was someone else, not only would they have to reshuffle the cards, they would also have to face the doubts of the other gangs. Although Misty School can support them with force, there will still be internal friction and hidden dangers. This is something the Misty School cannot accept. Moreover, as Brother Shui knows, the Misty School doesn't have any brothers who are proficient in water matters. The Luo Shui gang will still have to be managed by the people of Luo Shui gang, the most suitable candidate for this position. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent so much effort to invite Brother Shui to join my Misty School." Shui Yuping still didn't believe him and said, "Don't tell me Chief can rest assured that brother will go to Luo Shui?" Peng laughed and said, "Brother Shui, don't use people you don't trust. I can't help but feel at ease letting Brother Shui go to Luo Shui. However, I must let Brother Shui have some concerns. Brother Shui doesn't need to bring your family to Luo Shui. You can settle down in my Misty Mountain villa. Luo Shui isn't that far, and Brother Shui can return to the sect often. Moreover, I see that Nephew Tian Tian has a unique physique and is a martial arts talent. After this year, I'll let Chung Yu or Ahai take him in and let him practice my Misty Mountain Villa's techniques. In the future, he will definitely be a pillar of the martial arts world who possesses the strengths of two sections. Shui Yuping's expression changed slightly and quickly returned to normal. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, Chi, for the arrangement." Openg saw this and said with a smile, "Brother Shui doesn't seem to understand what I mean. However, it's no wonder. Since I'm letting Brother Shui join my Misty School, I'll naturally give Brother Shui some benefits." Otherwise, how could Brother Shui be so willing? Looking at Shui Yuping's puzzled expression, Openg laughed heartily and said, "Brother Shui, in Jianghu, there are many sections. Gangs also spring up like bamboo shoots after spring rain. New gangs are formed and old gangs are destroyed. A new generation replaces the old in Jianghu. For example, since the Luo Shui gang was established by the previous chief, it has only been 2 generations, close to 30 years. Shui Yuping nodded and said, "Yes. However, in the past 30 years, gangs like the Luo Shui gang are as numerous as carps crossing the river. There are countless of them." Openg continued, "In Jianghu, sects rise one after another, each leading the way for hundreds of years. However, there are still some sects that remain standing. They're like the rocks in the river. No matter how the situation in Jianghu changes, they are the eternal protagonists. I'm sure Brother Shui knows about these sections." Shui Yuping smiled and said, "Of course. Think about the Dalan Temple and the cult of incense. These super sects have been in Jianghu for hundreds of years. How can I not know?" Openg nodded and continued, "These super large sects have their own fixed mountain ranges, occupying a radius of dozens of miles for their disciples to live and practice martial arts. The most important thing is that these super large sects have their own martial arts heritage, and their disciples practice the martial arts of their own sections. These martial arts are mostly of the highest quality in Jianghu, so they can practice twice as fast with half the effort compared to ordinary martial arts. Moreover, these sects have their own methods of selecting disciples, so they can ensure that they can pick out suitable disciples from the masses of ordinary people, ensuring the prosperity of their sections." Shui Yuping smiled bitterly and said, "Faction leader is right. For example, I've only heard of the Dalan Temple's Buddha's Palm and Grasping Flower Heart Sutra. I've never seen them before. The Luohan Fist and Erlang Fist that are popular in Jianghu are probably low-level martial arts that the Dalan Temple disdains to practice. The Dalan Temple's Nigong Heart Sutra is rarely taught to outsiders. The Luo Shui faction doesn't even have their own Nigong Heart Sutra. I've only managed to obtain a Nigong Heart Sutra that was left behind by others. Otherwise, I don't know where in Jianghu I'd be holding swords and using blood to exchange for life." Openg said, "Yes, Brother Shui Sai is the voice of many people in Jianghu. It's easy to enter Jianghu, but difficult to practice martial arts. Without good luck and the heritage of a sect, it's extremely difficult to practice profound martial arts." Shui Yuping was still puzzled. These were secrets that were not easily known to the lower levels of Jianghu, but to the faction leaders and leaders of various sects, it was extremely common knowledge. What did Openg mean by saying it today? He could not help but frown, but he still said, "Yes, back then, when I was in my teens, I ran away from home and wanted to make a living in Jianghu. But I was fooled and joined a small faction. After fighting and killing for several years, I finally understood the situation in Jianghu. Only then did I know that the Dalan Temple and the incense cult were the holy places to practice martial arts. When I found a chance to go there and learn martial arts, I was told that I was already past the age to practice martial arts. Although I did learn some martial arts in those years of life and death battles, they were nothing but trash in the eyes of others. They were not worth mentioning at all. Now that I think about it, I was too impulsive and my thoughts were extremely naive. I thought that I could practice profound martial arts in Jianghu, really. At this point, Shui Yuping shook his head, looking as if he could not bear to look back on the past. Openg also agreed. Brother Shui is right. In Jianghu, it's always been the master who chooses the disciple. There's no such thing as the disciple looking for the master. Most of the disciples are selected at a young age to strengthen their muscles and bones and to forge their meridians. Occasionally, there are those who are not selected. Even if they have excellent aptitude, after their meridians are fixed, their achievements will be limited. Not to mention the Dalan Temple and the incense cult, even my Misty School will not accept most of them. Moreover, even if they have entered the sect, their aptitude still depends on their aptitude. Some practice external martial arts. Some practice internal martial arts. Different martial arts have different effects on different people. If the sect you enter doesn't have a suitable martial arts for you, your 10 years of practice will only be regarded as 1 year of practice for others. How can you stand out? Therefore, the martial arts inheritance of a sect and the foundation of the sect cultivation methods are extremely important. Shui Yuping's heart was filled with sorrow. Faction leader, you're right. Now I'm envious of those disciples who enter the Dalan Temple and the incense cult. They're really lucky to be able to practice profound and authentic martial arts. At this moment, Boss Hu was listening to their conversation, opened his mouth and said with a smile, Faction leader Shui, you don't have to be envious. Now there's a good opportunity in front of you. Shui Yuping was stunned and asked Boss Hu, Brother Hu, what do you mean? Openg said with a smile, Brother Shui, don't be anxious. When we talked about martial arts heritage, Brother Shui naturally thought of the famous sects that have been standing for hundreds of years. In fact, there are some sects that have martial arts heritage. Although they aren't super sects, they have survived the changes in Jianghu. Those that have been passed down for hundreds of years were just unlucky and couldn't become super sections. To be able to practice in such a sect is not much worse than the Dalan Temple. When Shui Yuping heard this, his face froze and immediately became ecstatic. He stood up from his chair and said, Faction leader, could it be that this Misty School has been passed down for hundreds of years? After he finished speaking, he looked at Openg's face in disbelief. Openg smiled and nodded proudly. Shui Yuping let out a long sigh and said, Compared to the Misty School, Luo Shui faction is just a newborn baby. To be able to enter the Misty School, which has been passed down for hundreds of years, is my fortune. Luo Shui's fortune. It's a pity that my meridians have already formed and I can't change to the Misty School's methods. What a pity. Openg comforted him. Brother Shui, there's no need to sigh. Didn't I just assume the responsibility of letting nephew Tian enter the Misty School? Isn't it a happy thing to let your children and grandchildren realize your ambitions? Shui Yuping was grateful and bowed again. Thank you, faction leader, for the arrangement. This time, he was sincerely bowing down. Openg quickly stood up and helped Shui Yuping up. Since we're brothers, there's no need to be so polite. After that, Openg patted Shui Yuping's shoulder. An extremely profound internal force swarmed into Shui Yuping's shoulder from the acupoint on her shoulder. In an instant, it flowed through Shui Yuping's meridians and unlocked all the acupoints that had been sealed earlier. It was only now that Openg was truly at ease with Shui Yuping. Shui Yuping felt the depth of Openg's internal energy and couldn't help but be shocked. In Jianghu, there were specific methods for unsealing meridians. If the method of unsealing the meridians was wrong, it would cause great harm to the human body. Openg actually didn't use any specific methods. Of course, he knew how to seal the meridians, but more importantly, he had confidence in his own internal energy. Chapter 89. when Peng used his profound internal energy to unseal all of Shui Yuping's acupoints. Shui Yuping realized that he was just a frog at the bottom of a well. The Luo Shui gang that he managed was not worth mentioning in front of these large sects with hundreds of years of history. At this time, Peng said, "Brother Shui, you don't have to regret it. My Misty School has countless ancient books for you to read. When you have time, you can go to the library and take a look. Although you can't practice internal energy cultivation methods, there are many martial arts you can refer to. Some of them don't require specific cultivation methods. When Brother Shui sees them, you can choose one or two to practice. Even if you can't practice them, you can refer to them to verify your own shortcomings." Shui Yuping bowed and thanked him. "Thank you for your help." Peng patted Shui Yuping's shoulder and said with a smile, "We're already brothers. Brother Shui is too polite. Hurry up and take a bath. There are other brothers waiting for us in the assembly hall. They're all waiting for Brother Shui to join us." At this time, Lu Qingyang, Lu Laowu, who was sitting below, had been impatient for a long time. If it weren't for Peng's repeated warnings, he wouldn't have been able to sit still. When he heard this, he immediately jumped up and shouted, "Motherfucker, gang leader Shui, hurry up and take a bath. Now my mouth is so thin that a bird is coming out." Shui Yuping smiled apologetically and said, "I'll go right away. Brothers, you can go first." Then, Shui Yuping followed old Four Shangwan to take a bath and change clothes. The others chatted and laughed as they returned to the assembly hall. The assembly hall was still filled with laughter, but everyone felt strange. Gang leader had been out for a long time, so why hadn't he come back yet? When would the celebration begin? Yin and Big Sister Qin were also whispering to each other. From time to time, they would look at the entrance of the assembly hall. When Peng and the others came back, Yin was relieved. Looking at her brother's obviously more high-spirited expression, Yin knew that her brother must have done something big. But what was it? Peng walked into the assembly hall and came to his seat. He didn't sit down, but turned around and said to everyone, "Brothers and sisters, I'm sure you've been waiting for a long time. I announce that the celebration feast will begin now. Let's all get drunk later." When everyone saw that the celebration banquet was held in the meeting room, they couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. It seemed like the gang leader was really happy. They couldn't help but shout, "All right, thank you, gang leader. We'll definitely get drunk in a while." Soon after, the gang members and servants brought up a sumptuous amount of wine and water. The celebration banquet began in a lively manner. Not long after, the dishes were placed on the table. At this time, everyone was quiet, waiting for their leader to propose the first toast. However, when they saw that Peng was sitting there steadily and didn't immediately get up, everyone was very surprised. Some people even began to whisper. Suddenly, two people came in from outside the door of the meeting room. The one in front was very familiar to everyone. It was Shangwan Fenglu of the 6 Ethereal Tigers. Following closely behind was a man in white. His face was tense, and he looked a bit tired, but his eyes were filled with joy. He raised his head slightly, showing a completely different temperament. Although he didn't look the same as Peng, the two looked surprisingly similar. Everyone couldn't help but compare this person with Peng in their hearts. They felt that Peng and this person were very similar, and it was difficult to tell who was better. But who was this person? When a man in white followed Shangwan Fenglu to stand in front of Peng, Peng personally stood up and offered the seat next to him. Everyone's doubts grew. Who was this person? He actually had such an identity. Just as everyone was whispering, Peng stood up and raised his wine cup, saying, "Brothers and sisters of the gang, the first toast of today's celebration banquet is a toast to everyone present. With everyone's hard work, the Misty School has become more prosperous with each passing day. With today's atmosphere, I hope that everyone will continue to work together in the future and make our family even better. Every day, there will be flourishing progress. Misty School is my home. Our development depends on everyone. Come, let me toast everyone." After he finished speaking, he was the first to drink the wine in his hand. When everyone heard this, they were all happy and said in unison, "Thank you. Misty School is my home. Our development depends on everyone. Cheers! After everyone finished drinking the wine in their cups, they sat down. Openg raised a second cup, saying, "Before I propose the second toast, let me introduce everyone to a person. Perhaps no one has seen this person before, but I guarantee that once I say this, everyone will know." As he said this, he affectionately pulled up the man in white sitting next to him, saying, "This is the Luo Shui gang Shui Yupeng, the gang leader." The originally noisy meeting room instantly became silent. That's right, no one had seen this person before, but the Luo Shui gang's name was very big. The Misty School had been busy for so long, and today's celebration banquet was to celebrate settling the Luo Shui gang. Now that the big boss of the enemy was sitting here, how can no one not know? Seeing everyone looking at each other in dismay, Openg was very satisfied with this effect and continued, "This second toast is to Gang Leader Shui and the brothers of the Luo Shui gang, to celebrate them joining our Misty School." These words were like a candle flame thrown into a fire, immediately igniting the enthusiasm of the Misty School's people. Everyone raised their cups and looked eagerly at Openg and Shui Yupeng. That's right, although they had taken down the core of the Luo Shui gang, the Luo Shui gang's power was still not firmly in the hands of the Misty School. If Shui Yupeng did not represent the Luo Shui gang in joining the Misty School, then there would definitely be some fierce battles. Moreover, it would be on water, which the Misty School was not good at. Needless to say, there would definitely be casualties. Now that the Luo Shui gang had joined the Misty School, naturally the two factions would become one. In the future, these fierce battles would not need to be fought, and there would be no bloodshed. This was naturally everyone's wish, so everyone was very happy and excitedly drank the second toast. Waiting for everyone to quiet down a bit, Openg raised a third toast and said to everyone with a smile, "This third toast needs everyone to toast our Misty School's vice gang leader." Hearing this, the hall was silent again. Vice gang leader? Strange. We've never heard of this before. Everyone's gaze turned towards the 6 Misty Tigers, but the 4 of them sat with their eyes down and nose down, not saying anything. Only Lu Qingyang and old Fifth Lu sat together with Stone Cow, the 2 of them drinking without paying attention to anyone else. Openg felt that the atmosphere in the hall was in his control, and he liked this feeling very much. Looking at everyone's expectant gazes, he smiled and explained, "Although the Luo Shui gang has joined our Misty School does not have anyone who is proficient in water matters. Therefore, if our Misty School wants to develop and expand in the future, we will have to change our bad habit of only developing on land and walking on one leg. Instead, we will have to develop on both land and water. Both hands must be strong, and only when both sides are strong can we truly be strong, and only then can we walk on the road of harmonious development. In view of this, we plan to use the Luo Shui gang as a test subject and give them special policies. We will make the Luo Shui gang a special gang, under the direct leadership of the Misty School's elders. The Luo Shui gang's development will be decided by the people of the Luo Shui gang, and we will give them a high degree of self-control. We will encourage the people of Luo Shui to control Luo Shui, and this policy will not change for the next 20 years. In the future, the gang leader of the Luo Shui gang will be called Chief Executive, which means special leader. Moreover, this Chief Executive will directly be our Misty School's vice gang leader. Therefore, the first Chief Executive of the Luo Shui gang will be Vice Gang Leader Shui Yupeng. Come, everyone, let's toast Vice Gang Leader Shui. Shui Yupeng, who was standing to the side, was stunned on the spot. This day's experience could be said to be extremely thrilling, as exciting as jumping off a cliff. Just a moment ago, he was still in the upper echelons of the Luo Shui gang, but in an instant, he fell to the bottom of the valley and became a captive of the Misty School. A long sword flashed in front of his eyes, and he thought that his life was coming to an end. Even Shui Yupeng's nerves of steel couldn't help but crack. However, after Openg's wave of combo punches, he was dazzled. For himself, for his family, for the pursuit of the peak of martial arts, and for his child, he was willing to enter the Misty School. He originally thought that he would just be a puppet gang leader, and at this moment he had a calm heart and very low-key participated in this so-called celebratory feast. But this Peng's words once again elevated him to the top of the slope. Now, standing on the high cliff, looking at the abyss that he had just jumped, he really didn't dare to believe that this was real. He couldn't help but hurriedly refuse. Gang leader, this is too frightening. This brother has a heart condition. You can't play with him like this. Peng laughed heartily, saying, Vice gang leader Shui, do you think I'm joking with you? Our Misty School is most particular about using virtue to win people over. Brother Shui has been in the Luo Shui gang for many years, and everyone knows that you have a chivalrous heart. Even in the Misty School, everyone admires you. It is extremely suitable for you to lead the Luo Shui gang. If you don't have the title of Vice Gang Leader, won't the brothers of the Luo Shui gang be bitterly disappointed? You haven't even truly enjoyed the benefits of the Misty School, and you're already half a level lower than others. You'll have no reason to let the Jianghu people say that our Misty School's upper echelons do not conduct themselves well. The position of Vice Gang Leader will definitely be given to the Luo Shui gang. I've already said it out loud in front of everyone. Do you still want me to take it back? Shui Yupeng was extremely excited and held Peng's hand as he said, Organization, I've finally found an organization. I've been the gang leader of the Luo Shui gang for so many years, but I've never felt the warmth of the Misty School. In the Misty School, I've found the feeling of home. In the past, when I was in the Luo Shui gang, I had to cross the river by feeling my way around. Now that I've followed the Misty School, it's truly a broad path. Brother my parents gave birth to me, and they used me to support the Misty School. Peng was also very happy and held Shui Yupeng's hand, saying, Good, brother. With your words, it's enough. I believe that with the two of us working together, we'll definitely be able to catch up with the great Lin Chao legend and do something that will allow us to conquer the heavens. Chapter 90. The celebration banquet reached its first climax with sect leader O's vision of the future. Everyone in the meeting hall was excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They raised their cups to each other, as if the entire Jianghu had become ethereal. Naturally, there were still sober people in the hall. For example, Peng, who was surrounded by everyone, the 6 ethereal tigers who were competing with the other elders in drinking, and Yin, who was laughing with the female disciples. There was no lack of intelligent people in Jianghu, but there was a lack of great people who could direct the thoughts and actions of fools. Perhaps they knew that some words could not be trusted, but looking at the bloody Jianghu, why couldn't they sing today and drink today? Outside the meeting hall, the twilight was like a song. A few days after the celebration banquet, Shui Yupeng rushed to Luo Shui to regain control of the Luo Shui gang. Under Shui Yupeng's repeated requests, Peng reluctantly sent Shangwan Fenglu and a group of elites to accompany her and assist her in handling the affairs of the Luo Shui gang. The merger between the Misty School and the Luo Shui gang was indeed an inconspicuous small wave in the Jianghu where sects were fighting each other. It did not attract much attention, but in some places there were different reactions. Wanjian Peak Meeting Hall. Wan Qingjiu listened to the report with a gloomy face. He slapped the armrest of his chair and said, If the Misty School continues to develop, how will my Wan Jianpeak deal with it? Everyone, do you have any good suggestions? If not, go to the grassroots and find a few representatives to come up with a proposal for us to discuss. In a flower pavilion of the aroma cult, the fragrance seeped into one's heart. A pair of jade-like hands were holding a piece of fragmented paper. A pleasant voice rang out. Leader O, you are truly extraordinary. This servant's vision is not bad, but I don't know how far you could develop. I'm looking forward to it. In a secluded hut in the Dalan Temple, Under the candlelight, a withered hand was holding a small piece of paper. After reading it, 2 fingers pinched it, and the paper was set ablaze. The ashes of the burnt paper floated to the ground. A hoarse voice sounded, "What a fool! Such a delicious bait was placed in front of me, and I didn't even get to eat it. Instead, it was taken away by someone else. You made me waste my energy. It seems that I still have to think of a way out. In this misty school, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. A mysterious place, a mysterious person, and a mysterious voice. This Jianghu sure is lively. Why hasn't the misty school died out yet?" However, Openg didn't know about this. He and his misty school were developing steadily. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know anything about the Jianghu. Even what happened in the misty school wasn't something Zhang Xiaohua could know. He and his learning of fist techniques had reached a bottleneck. Saying it was a bottleneck was exaggerating Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation. However, after the 4 people from the Misty School roughly taught Zhang Xiaohua some basic fist techniques, a strange phenomenon occurred when they taught Zhang Xiaohua the Liu family fist, the Kai family fist, the Li family fist, the Mo family fist, the Wu family fist, and the Shui family fist based on their own knowledge. Zhang Xiaohua gradually forgot the fist techniques they taught her in the past, but after a night, she would always remember some of them, whether it was the 3rd or 4th style. It would always show that she had learned them. However, for the fist techniques that came after, no matter how much Zhang Xiaohua learned the day before, after a night, she would completely forget them the next day. Even if she continued to learn, after a day, it was still the same. He Tianshu was completely scratching his head. In He Tianshu's mind, Zhang Xiaohua could be considered a genius for being able to lift a 250-kilogram object with one arm without any training. Although this weight wasn't too shocking to the people of the Jianghu, just thinking about the effects of Zhang Xiaohua's training in martial arts was enough to move him. Although she was past her age and couldn't achieve great success in martial arts, she wouldn't be able to be as famous as the Stone Cow in the future. However, it was more than enough to change He Tianshu's current situation. But this Zhang Xiaohua's brain? There was really nothing much to say. This child didn't look stupid, so why couldn't she learn it? She couldn't even learn the most basic fist techniques, let alone the internal strength cultivation method that Zhang Xiaohua didn't even know existed. A few days ago, although Zhang Xiaohua couldn't remember all the fist techniques that he taught her, she could at least learn a little. He Tianshu thought that if he let Zhang Xiaohua learn, she might be enlightened. But now, He Tianshu was completely disheartened. Zhang Xiaohua, this rotten wood, was completely rotten and couldn't be carved. Therefore, He Tianshu said, "Zhang Xiaohua, your cultivation has now reached a bottleneck. Breaking through this bottleneck depends on luck. For the time being, I won't teach you other fist techniques. You should practice the previous fist techniques first. When you break through the bottleneck, I'll teach you." He sent Zhang Xiaohua away and left Zhang Xiaohua to practice the horse stance while thinking about those incomplete fist techniques. However, this Zhang Xiaohua was also very diligent and hardworking. Every day, he would wake up when the sun rose and never return to the house until late at night. He would always practice martial arts at that place. No matter if it was wind or rain, he wouldn't move even if lightning struck him. This kind of tenacity made He Tianshu very moved, but when he thought about his brain, He Tianshu gave up on other ideas. He Tianshu wasn't the only one who was moved. One-armed elder Yu also came to watch Zhang Xiaohua practice almost every day. He knew his situation like the back of his hand and nodded his head every time. However, this nod was to affirm Zhang Xiaohua's hard work. It had nothing to do with talent at all. On this day, at night, the wind was clear and the stars were sparse. He Tianshu was in a very good mood. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua practicing the same few moves over and over again, his heart skipped a beat. He called for a pause and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you've been practicing for so long and at least know some fist techniques. Today, I'll let you spar with a real martial arts practitioner. How about it?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at He Tianshu and said, "Captain He, do you think I could do it?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Why not? Martial arts experts also start from the basics. You don't have to be afraid. I'll ask little Air to go easy on you and let him spar with you." After he finished speaking, he said to a Misty School disciple who was practicing next to him, "Little Aaron, yeah, come over here and spar with Zhang Xiaohua. You could just practice with him. Don't take it seriously." Little Aaron yeah retracted his moves and said, "Okay, Captain He, I understand." Then he closed his legs and put his palms forward. Zhang Xiaohua took a look. "Oh, this is familiar. Isn't this the Arhut fist starting stance?" Although this was his first time sparring with someone and his palms were already sweating, he still followed little Aaron Ye's example and went into a starting stance. Then little Aaron Ye shouted, "Zhang Xiaohua, you go first." Zhang Xiaohua replied, "Okay, brother Nye, be careful." After he finished speaking, he raised his leg and moved forward. He pushed his right fist forward and punched Zhang Xiaohua. That little Aaron Ye saw that Zhang Xiaohua's fist was getting bigger and bigger. When it was right in front of him, he twisted his body and used his left hand to hold Zhang Xiaohua's wrist while his right hand punched Zhang Xiaohua's nose. But a mortal's nose was a weak spot. Although little Aaron Ye was going easy on him, Zhang Xiaohua's tears still flowed. He couldn't see anything and didn't care about practicing anymore. He turned around and used his shirt to wipe his tears. After Zhang Xiaohua finished wiping his tears, he looked at little Aaron Ye and said with a determined expression, "Come, brother Nye, let's continue." After he finished speaking, the two went into a fighting stance again. This round of sparring was a copy of the first round, except that Zhang Xiaohua charged forward too quickly. Little Aaron Ye couldn't hold back his fist in time. That first punch landed solidly on Zhang Xiaohua's nose. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua's nose bled. Zhang Xiaohua immediately jumped out of the circle. As he wiped the blood from his nose, he shouted, "I'm not fighting anymore. I'm not fighting anymore. You're cheating. Why didn't you follow the routine?" Everyone was stunned. If it wasn't for the time they spent with Zhang Xiaohua and trained their nerves, this sentence was enough to make them short-circuit. Poor Zhang Xiaohua. He thought they were going to follow the routine. Everyone sighed. Self-taught talent really can't do. It's better to be a full-time student with a master and a formal education. After Zhang Xiaohua finished cleaning up, He Tianshu told him the meaning of the sparring. Zhang Xiaohua finally understood. What he said was true. If it was just a competition of routines, everyone could just use their own fist techniques. Where would the blood come from and the life be used as a bet? For the third time, Zhang Xiaohua was very careful. He slowly followed Nye Xiao, or steps and moves. He began to show a little of his moves. Although he was very unfamiliar with it, it was the first step. However, his hands, arms, and legs were all very stiff. He was like a virgin who had just entered a field of flowers, paying attention to his left and right, up and down. He was really like a clumsy bear. On the other hand, Nye Xiao actually had a fiddling attitude. His fists and legs were extremely beautiful, flying here and there like a butterfly. Zhang Xiaohua's fists and legs could not land on him at all, and his own body, face, and leg were all hit by Nye Xiao. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua was also extremely angry. When he saw Nye Xiao use a move, he felt that the move of Erlang Punch was suitable, so he used all the strength in his body and punched Nye Xiao. His fist arrived in front of Nye Xiao's eyes with a whoosh sound. The strength of his fist did not seem to be inferior to the punch he had thrown at He Tianshu that day. In Zhang Xiaohua's mind, he should at least send Nye Xiao flying. After all, this was a fist with the strength of 250 Jin. However, the reality was far beyond Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. When Nye Xiao saw the fist coming, he didn't panic. His fist turned into a palm. One hand wrapped around a bowl with golden silk and caught Zhang Xiaohua's fist. His other hand reached forward and grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's collar. Then he spun around and used the four tails to lift 1,000 Jin technique. He pulled Zhang Xiaohua's body along the direction of his fist. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's small body flew off the ground like an arrow. Fortunately, there was a medicinal field in front. The soil was soft and the medicinal plants were also ordinary. Wei Tianshu saw this. He didn't stop him. In fact, He Tianshu's loss of confidence in Zhang Xiaohua was also because of this. She had the strength, but she didn't know how to use it. It was like a 3-year-old child who could play with a 1,000-gene meteor hammer. Although it was amazing, if he wasn't careful, the result would be his head being smashed. At that time, he would lose his life. And although Zhang Xiaohua had the strength of 1,000 gene, the path of fist techniques was like rotten wood. She couldn't use her strength. This Nie Xiao, was just a low-level disciple of the Misty School. A simple 4 tails to lift 1,000 gene technique was enough to take Zhang Xiaohua's life, let alone others. Not long after, as expected, a dusty Zhang Xiaohua safely returned. Only her clothes were covered in dust, and her hair was covered in mud. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the regret and dejection that He Tianshu thought. Instead, she was unusually happy. She walked in front of Nie Xiao, and hurriedly asked what fist technique it was. Why didn't she teach it to him a few days ago? Nie Xiao looked at her innocently and pitifully pointed at He Tianshu and said, "Brother, I'll have to let Captain He tell you." Zhang Xiaohua quickly walked over and begged He Tianshu to teach her this fist technique. He Tianshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I'm very supportive of your desire to learn martial arts. But everything has to be done step by step. If you don't have a good foundation, you won't succeed in learning any high-level martial arts. The martial arts that Xiao is using isn't a fist technique. It's just an application of fist techniques. You haven't even learned the basics of fist techniques. How can I teach you? Moreover, this 4 tails to lift 1,000 gene technique doesn't just require posture. It also requires the application of strength. This is a technique unique to the Misty School. You're not a disciple of the Misty School now, so I don't dare to teach you. Even if you want to learn, I'll have to ask the manor head and wait for the relevant leader's approval before I can consider it." After that, He Tianshu smiled apologetically and said, "I'll reveal one more thing. This approval needs to be sought from the various leaders and then passed down layer by layer. By the time it reaches me, I don't know how long it'll take. The style of the higher-ups is debatable. You'd better practice your fist techniques steadily and pass your bottleneck before you can make any plans." Zhang Xiaohua was rejected by He Tianshu and was slightly sad. But he also knew that he had only gained the manor head's favor. It was already good enough that he was fated to learn the fist techniques. And seeing that He Tianshu didn't hide anything from him, he knew that he had learned quite a lot. However, his fist techniques were indeed too weak. Before he learned everything and received He Tianshu's approval, he didn't have the right to complain. Zhang Xiaohua's first martial arts competition thus ended. To Nie Xiao, it was just a game. But Zhang Xiaohua saw a whole new world. At least he knew that the competition didn't follow the rules. Then, it seemed that he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Even if he didn't learn the full set of moves, he could still compete. Then, why did team leader he keep asking him to learn the full set of fist techniques before talking about the next step? This question stayed in Zhang Xiaohua's mind for a long time, and he didn't have an answer. However, this didn't affect his enthusiasm to practice martial arts. After team leader he and the others from the Misty School washed up and went to bed, Zhang Xiaohua still continued to practice his shabby fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua had been in the Huanqi Mountain Villa for more than a month. On weekdays, he leveled the herbal field, uprooted the weeds, and watered the fields. What he did was the usual business in the Guozhuang house. He also practiced his fist techniques in the morning and at night. His life was very comfortable. Moreover, the meals were delicious, and there was a constant supply of meat. In Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, this was the life of an immortal. He had long put aside his homesickness and even almost forgot that he had a biological second brother in the nearby Pingyang city. The manservants in the Huanqi Mountain Villa had a few days off every month. They could go out or rest in their own rooms. Naturally, it was very relaxing to rest in the villa. The steward didn't care much about it. If they went out, it would be very troublesome. Not only did they have to report to the steward for approval, they also had to go to the designated place in the villa to file a record and issue a waste token. They would only be allowed to go out after they agreed on a time to return to the villa. On this day, after Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing her fist techniques, she walked into the small house with a frown. However, she found that Ma Jing was actually using a copper basin to wash his feet. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She quickly turned her head and thought strangely. The sun still rises from the east, as usual. I don't know that this sloppy Ma Jing is actually washing his feet today. As she thought, she quickly walked forward and touched Ma Jing's forehead with concern. Then, she touched her own forehead and said in puzzlement, "Brother Ma, you don't have a fever." Ma Jing said angrily, "Of course I'm not sick. Why would I have a fever? It's such a good day. I can go out and breathe in the fresh air. Why would I be sick?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and asked, "Brother Ma, what do you mean? The air in this villa is very fresh every day. It's just that it's different from our house." Ma Jing pursed his lips and said, "You country bumpkin. What do you know? No matter how fresh the air in the villa is, it's not as fragrant as the pollen in Zuixiang House." Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. Although she had never been to those places, she couldn't help but hear Ma Jing talk about the wonders of those places every day. Naturally, she knew what kind of place it was. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat and said, "Brother Ma, I've always heard you mention Zuixiang House. It seems like you're going there today." Ma Jing looked around carefully and said softly, "You're young, but you know a lot. You're very smart. Your brother Ma is going there to take care of their business. Why? You want to go too?" Zhang Xiaohua said carefully, "Brother Ma, you're mistaken. I just want to ask. I've been in the villa for a month and haven't left the villa. I heard that we can go out every month. I want to follow Brother Ma to Pingyang City. I won't be going to Zuixiang House, but it's good to walk around." Ma Jing tilted his head and thought for a while. He guessed that Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't delay his important matters and nodded his head in agreement. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and thanked him. Then, she quickly tidied up and sat by the Kong bed to wait for Ma Jing. She thought that Ma Jing would be done tidying up very quickly. But seeing Ma Jing tidying up this and fiddling with that, tidying himself from head to toe and changing his appearance completely, Zhang Xiaohua felt a sense of freshness. How was this the sloppy Ma Jing? He was simply a handsome and dashing fair-skinned young gentleman. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. He looked outside and saw that the sun was already high up in the sky. It was already late. This Ma Jing took longer to dress up than the ladies on the sedan. He couldn't help but urge him, "Brother Ma, can you hurry up? It's already late." Who knew that Ma Jing was still calm and unhurried? He looked at himself in the mirror again and said, "I'm not busy. I'm not busy. The ladies at Zuixiang House are probably still dreaming. Why should I go so early?" Zhang Xiaohua was so angry that his nose was crooked and he almost fainted on the Kong bed. Fortunately, he had been hanging out with Ma Jing for a long time and was knowledgeable. He immediately took the horse stance and didn't fall. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.